Okay. Espera, yo estoy. Ahí estoy. Hello, Kenny.
Hello.
How are you? This is Latin America. So they're going to come at their own pace.
That's okay.
How are you? I cannot see you.
Oh, camera's on.
Really? Can it be me? The problem? Camera is on.
Uh-oh. It says live YouTube.
Yeah, camera is on.
It says video on.
Was it? You know that 2 days ago I have like a weird thing in the computer, but weird. That, for example, there's a video, and half of the video, like, you have to really curate the chopping to drop half of the video. Was taken of a previous interview. I know.
Do you not see?
I cannot see you. I cannot see you.
Should I go into another room? Maybe the signal is weak.
No. Let's do as follows. Hold on. I'm changing to this. Hold on. I'm changing connection. See.
Where are you? In London?
I'm in Hastings.
Oh, I see.
I'm in Hastings, and I came for one day. How weird. Let me see the settings, because maybe there's something.
I have this Paul Tech slide presentation whenever you're ready for that. When we get. So what's
there you are.
Oh.
I can see you now.
You're better off not seeing me.
What?
You're better off not having to look at me.
You're looking good.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Let me record. There you are. Let me see how's the streaming going. The streaming is going, but it's dark.
Let me see what I can do.
No, it's not you. This is like dark, like black, pitch black. No, there's something going on with the configuration or something. So I'm going to, well, we're recording this here, so there's no problem. If we're recording it in Zoom, there's no problem but we told people, that's the thing. Anyway, yeah, Zoom with YouTube, they're like a weird combination.
I've never done that before.
Yeah, all the time, and it works. But as I said, a couple of days ago, I had something weird in the computer, and there were elections yesterday.
You're from Argentina.
Well, what?
You're from Argentina.
I'm from Argentina. I used to be Minister of Culture of Argentina.
Oh my God! And they just had their preliminary elections yesterday.
How do you know those things?
I read, my friend.
Oh my God, yeah.
Unlike most Americans, I pay a lot of attention to the world outside my own bubble.
But that's really bizarre.
Although I didn't make any sweeping generalization, and I know that inflation is 120%.
Well, don't tell me. I'm selling my flat there, and I'm selling it less than I bought it.
Oh no!
We're at that level.
And the money's worth less.
The money's worth less. It's a disaster. It has to do with when we had a dictatorship, yeah. And when the dictatorship ended, we had this president that was the president of the democratic transition, and he won the election with Saatchi. Saatchi was the advertising company that gave them the how do you call it, the motto, the jingle,
They've done that before in the UK, famously.
Exactly. So it was with democracy you eat, with democracy you heal, with democracy you, and I think that got into the public conscience, and they think that things are done by magic. And so, for example, there's a crisis, and they hire more employees in the state, so in the public sector, and it's a calamity, and it's going. But now, the one that won the election, do you know that it's the primaries?
Yes.
So it's not the election.
But it's also right-leaning.
Yeah. You know, the guy Milei, I met him on a TV set 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. The guy is mad. It's like it's like right. It's libertarianism, and he's actually mad, but mad. The guy that has issues.
Seems to have a similar problem in America at the current moment.
Well, it's that's what I'm saying. It's
politics. You bring up politics and some of the issues you'd like to discuss, and
because
I think politics is. I mean, we all try to help, and we all want to be cognizant of the world we live in. But in my lifetime, I've never encountered a politician that inspired me or filled me with hope or positive feelings about anything.
And well, we were going to talk about that, but I mean, let's start with tech, because I mean, I'm very interested in your take. You're like the referent on tech.
Well, I mean, I think there are various people that have written PhDs on him and various curators. It was just a show in Rome, and there's a number of people that, I mean, now, I don't know. There's a few people, and I've been interested for almost 30 years.
Why?
Do you want to, are we starting with people, or do you?
Let's start because I might have sent them the wrong times. so
I'm so surprised. I'm so
this
surprised.
is like 5 different time zones. I mean, Greece, Buenos Aires, Santiago.
That's the world we live in, a world of interconnectedness. And I don't understand why politicians, people in America especially, globalism became like a pejorative term. And for me, I've always been globally minded or internationally minded. And I started my career by going to Germany and teaching myself art history by the United States. And that's really how I informed myself.
I taught in Germany last year.
Oh, amazing.
No, the 4 years, and I resigned.
Oh, really?
Oh, no, I mean, like a nightmare.
Where?
This was in Gießen, in the Justus Lipsius Gießen University. It's a huge university.
Yeah.
But in Hesse.
I see.
Nearby.
I have a slide presentation. Do you want me to go to that now?
Yeah. So I have to share with you. I have to give you.
You have to give me the power to share my screen.
Okay. How do I do that?
I make work with digital means, but I'm technologically challenged.
I'm like the same. Hold on. The other day they told me how to do this, and so I guess I'm going to participants. Yeah, and can you Schacther, and can you Schacther mute stop video chat, make host.
Yeah, that'll do it.
There you are.
Okay. So I go to share screen and share my screen. And you see my little kitties. 2 of my kids.
This is 4 boys.
I had, but I tragically lost one 4 years ago.
I'm very sorry about that.
Thank you. Which I mean, I've discussed it in various lectures with students because I think it's important issues to talk about, but let's take one step at a time.
Yeah, of course.
But it's pretty, I mean, I have no joy in my life, no happiness. I love my work and I love my kids, and that's it.
You know that in Greece, I bought this, like the half of the house to this lady that she lost her son and her husband the same year that I lost my mom, and I'm an only child, and I had lost my dad.
How old was your mom?
No, she was old. She was 82, 85. And right. After a long, it was like Barbara Streisand, a long farewell, like 3 cancers, and it was a mess. But this woman that I met her in Crete, and I clicked because she had lost her son and her husband. And to me, those people that are like you or her, that has that determination to carry on, it's amazing. And they do, but they do in mourning, it's in loss. So it's
well, I mean, I lost my mother when I was 13. She had an incremental deterioration from a brain tumor, and as a child, that was a pretty monumental and
it defines you.
Yes,
it defines you through death.
And believe it or not, because I didn't plan this, but this really relates to my relationship with the work of Paul Thek on a very fundamental level.
Oh, okay. I was going to talk about something similar in relation your relationship with art, and certain things that Foucault says about art. But you know that I'm working on AIDS and art, and there's this AIDS and art, like the art during the AIDS crisis in Argentina and Chile.
I mean, I love David Wojnarowicz, and he did some extraordinary, stirring writing about his experience with AIDS one piece in general where his friend was thrown out of this restaurant because he had visible
sarcoma.
Yes,
and
the owner of this Polish restaurant in the East Village threw his friend out, and he subsequently wrote an essay about he re-entered the restaurant and just went crazy and had like a near violent episode, screaming at the owner of the restaurant for his behavior. And it was it was in this journal called the Journal of Contemporary Art. And after 20 years, it stuck in my mind so firmly, I was able to track down this out-of-print essay. And it's
really but do you know that the relationship? I'm a friend with Nan Goldin and with Bill Arning. Bill Arning is going to be like in 10 days in the podcast. And Bill Arning is the curator, the curator of ACT UP during that time. So, and he had a gallery that he was invited to Argentina. It was a completely different thing because in Argentina, the AIDS crisis comes after the dictatorship, after the missing people. So it was like a lot. But what I wanted to tell you is that there's this phrase by this artist that I'm very interested in called Pedro Lemebel. And it says that morning, like productive morning, because in Latin America we start, you know, that for Freud, mourning is more like a pathology. You know, like if you don't mourn, you get melancholic. So it's telling me that I have to be with you.
You have to what?
To be with you. So so I mean, it's like the thing is like being in. Okay, I have to stop this.
It's funny because I was going to quote Freud about collecting art, which he thinks stems from bad toilet training, people that obsessively hoard.
Well, but
voracious appetite to.
Or it has to do with. Well, let's talk about that later because it has to do with the past also, with you know, the memories and like that too.
And it's also a longing for some support that never existed on an emotional level.
Well, this was very interesting. Kenny Schacther is with us. Kenny, just before your generous presentation, would you like to? I wouldn't dare introduce you. Would you like to introduce yourself? You're a polymath. Who are you?
I don't think I've ever seen you face to face, nor spoken to you. But for some reason, we wanted to kill each other for quite some extended period of time.
You wanted to kill me more than I wanted to kill you.
But now I remember you wrote an article about me on your blog.
Yes.
How awful I was. But let's not.
Did you know that I was cancelled in Argentina when I got the Peter Marcy?
I'm so shocked. And surprised.
Well, I mean, so it's basically what you do now. But the things that we have different. I mean, I come from below. I needed to shock to get attention. The thing I did very well in England with the blog, but I stopped because it was very risky legally.
Yeah.
So that's why I changed to, because that is strategy. I mean, you one of those days you were pissed off, you sue me, and you win.
I mean, I've had legal threats, fisticuffs, people throwing punches at me, death threats. And when it came to hate mail to my children, I really thought it was time to take a break for a little while because, I mean, the upside is negligible, although it's impactful to a wide audience, which we'll get into later. But sharing information and pulling back the curtains and being revelatory in a frank and forthright and honest way makes you all but an anomaly in the art world, where fake news isn't only extant or existing, but it's embraced.
And it's uncanny. It happens with during my cancellation, the level of vitriol, because you know that I realized the reaction of people of the Argentine feminists. Okay, it's a very specific group. The reaction of certain group when I asked for the permissions for them to reproduce the images of certain artists, two artists, for my blog, and the level of how they described me, I was shocked. And but it had to do also with how this culture that we are today was being constructed. Because that time we have to remember what it was. It was the beginning of the social media, We didn't really know what it was, you know. So, and at the end, and the effect that it had on us, on narcissists, on our own insecurities, when you start getting this kind of like celebrity, you know. So it's weird. It's weird. It's a weird one.
I see now. There's always going to be technical problems. The electricity stopped on the computer.
Oh, right.
Oh no, that's on. That's off. Hang on. Okay, current. Okay, I'm ready.
Right. So I was asking you to introduce yourself. How would you define what you do? How do you get to this point?
After basically doing relatively the same thing for nearly 35 years, I could finally say that I'm an artist, a writer, and a lecturer.
In that order?
Well, yes, I'm warming up to acknowledging what I do as an art form, even though I've been making art for 35 years, but I mentioned to you, or you brought it up to me, that it took the art world over a decade to acknowledge that I was a writer, largely in the beginning because I had no audience until smartphones where people could more readily access the work, a wider audience. And then by writing these articles that, I mean, provocative is an easy way. I consider it investigative journalism about the machinations in the art world, and particularly the art market. But I mean, the fact is, I'm the worst when it comes to money. I couldn't give a shit about money. I'm the worst at. I mean, I've made it before, and I've lost it co-equally. It's never driven me to do one activity, but because the art world is such a kind of obtuse, purposefully, it's ridiculously hierarchical, absurdly exclusive, and it's all about compartmentalization, pigeonholing. You know, I always say the only word the art world knows is the word no. No, you can't do this, say that. Anyway, because I'm an outsider, I never took an art class in my life, even though I'm a professor at the University of Zurich and various other institutions I intermittently teach. But I'll always be an outsider because I studied philosophy and law, and never with the intent of pursuing law, but it was
just... And you started philosophy before studying law?
Yes, that was my undergraduate degree, along with political science. I specialized in Middle Eastern,
Me too.
Middle Eastern politics and philosophy.
It's quite weird because it's philosophy, and then because philosophy is like, I mean, for the middle class, is I don't know where you come from, but I mean, for the middle class, it's kind of like a weird thing to study, unless you are like from England.
It was the first time in I was an academic. I was, I mean, this isn't like a therapy session, but for the first 13, 14 years of my life, I lost my mother very young. My parents were wildly unsupportive. They never nurtured or affirmed any behavior.
You're Canadian, right?
Only I'm from Long Island in New York. Only bad behavior. So I only ever had, I mean, if you want to be a pop psychologist, you could say that the fact that I only ever had attention as a child for the formative years of my life, I only got attention when I fucked up and did something wrong, which happened to have been quite regularly. And I think there's something to be said by the fact that my work evokes a lot of reaction. And sometimes I wonder if there's some subconscious attempt to just poke people in order to get a reaction.
When you talk about your work, what do you refer to?
Well, like I said, so I mean, I started curating shows literally in the year 1990. Part of the reason was, so I never knew, because I was born in the suburbs, I had no friends, literally. I don't have many now. I prefer that.
Yeah, me too.
I would basically be squirreled away in my bedroom. The wall was made out of cork, so I could pin things into it. And in a sense, so what I would do is I was a voracious reader of magazines, more so than books, I have to say. And I would just constantly pull out images and rearrange them on my wall incessantly. And in a sense, it's not too dissimilar from what I've done as an artist.
Yeah, or a collector.
Yes. And in school, I had no academic inclinations on the most basic level. I had no interest in anything. Pretty much, I had weight issues and I stuttered. I had a speech impediment.
All right.
Okay. Part of the reason I never shut up now is because for the first 14 years I couldn't speak, especially like.
You know that I thought about that because I thought I have to say this. We had those encounters at the beginning that were very performative, that were very, very, very edgy. But then I came back to your work now. Something I saw the interview, I saw many interviews. I saw the interview of Medvedev, right? And which I really liked. And what struck me was, and I think we're similar in that is your generosity of spirit when it comes to art. And that is something that you can see. It's immediate. It doesn't come from a place, from a career place. It doesn't come from a social place. It doesn't come from an aesthetic place. It comes from a place of passion that probably you cannot even understand yourself. What is it in art that is so appealing to you? But can you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to have to switch rooms because the electricity keeps.
Do ask you.
I love the fact that we're dealing with like the edge of technology. You're mating Zoom to YouTube, which is quite extraordinary. And nevertheless, in 100 years, when phones are embedded into our skin, we'll still be without a connection and yelling into the air. Hello, hello.
They told me that next year we're going to start doing that.
You're still going to have problems for eternity.
I was hoping that you gave me a solution for Alexa. I hate her. At the beginning, I loved her. I know I hate her.
But it's funny because you mentioned this generosity of spirit, and I don't want to be pretentious and self-aggrandizing because I'm very much deprecating. But you also mentioned politics and political art. And for me, my politics is a radical sharing, a spirit of sharing. And that's why I get more joy and satisfaction from teaching and inspiring people and facilitating opportunities for other people in a world characterized by the doors aren't shut, they're slammed in your face till it hits you in the face.
It's a marketing strategy, actually.
And that to me is I never had interest other than I was eating and masturbating, and which is why I like Vito Acconci as much as Paul Thek, because he launched his career masturbating under
the floor.
In 1972 in Sonnabend Gallery in New York City in a piece called Seabed. And that to me was this profound wrecking ball of an intellectual wrecking ball.
Hey, can you show us some of your art here?
Yeah, but I'm going to have to bear with me while I shift location.
Yeah. Do as you please. And in the meantime, I'm going to check that the YouTube is okay.
Hang on.
I can see that there are 5 people. Alexis, are you there? Because I cannot see you.
Okay, here we go. Okay, power on. It's so silly, but it's kind of funny. Anyway, well, I mean, yeah. So I think, like it's been said before, like philosophically speaking, or just with morals and integrity, you spend your life learning and developing a specialization, and then it's your moral. I feel compelled, morally obligated to help other people. It gives me, I mean, as much as I am narcissistic and love a break and love to succeed on some basic level, material or otherwise, or getting opportunities.
But you just said, I mean, it's not narcissism because you just said what happened when you were a child. That's not narcissism. That's
no,
like,
I had no sense.
Survival.
My self-esteem remains, even though I could be bombastic and talk a lot about myself, but ultimately my self-esteem is never that of a normal person.
It's survival. It's survival instinct more than narcissism. Yeah.
And like I'm aware that my whole career is driven by love and passion for art. And that's because I never knew art existed as a thing in the most like simplistic level. I went to college when I studied philosophy, and I had never been to a museum or a gallery in my entire life. In fact, I never knew that there was such a thing. I thought an artist, by the time I started going to museums, of course, I had heard about them and read about them. I thought an artist made a work of art and then it went directly to an institution with no intermediaries. I didn't know there was such an intermediary. So when I went to Andy Warhol's estate sale at Sotheby's in 1988, and talk about an epiphany, it's like I got hit over the head with a mallet. I was shocked to see that not only was it, I thought it would just be a bunch of Warhols, and like many things that are wonderful and really significant for your own self-awareness, I didn't appreciate Warhol until years after I first interacted with it. And I went to the sale procrastinating between jobs. I worked as a lawyer. I worked as a lawyer, as a writer. That's how I learned to write. And I worked on the floor of the stock exchange, casting around. That's why I went to law school, to buy 3 years. I never went to school. I told my family I was in night school. There was no night school. I lied, took the exams. And then I went into fashion business, believe it or not.
Don't pay attention. Carry on.
So, and I didn't know that art could be bought or sold. It's funny because you mentioned the commercial aspect of life and capitalism and the negative implications of being a capitalistic leaning towards what I do. But yeah, I never knew that art could be owned. And once I found out about the systematized art world, art market, I mean, it was the most profound revelation that touched me from my head to my toe. And I immediately started, I bought some. I tried to get an unsecured loan from a bank. They looked at me on crack. They threw me out of the bank, but I had somehow managed to pass the bar exam. And I had the manager of the law firm that I was writing for, freelance. He called the bank and they gave me some money, and I bought a Cy Twombly hand-painted print. And that was the first foray into art ever. That was the first gallery I ever went into in my life. I wasn't aware.
Which one?
It was called Herschel and Adler Modern, and it was a show of multiples and prints by Sigmar Polke. I curated the first show of Gerhard Richter and Sigmar Polke in 50 years. And it was Twombly, Polke, and Joseph Beuys. And now
Joseph Beuys is a big inspiration on us, on our project.
Oh man, I'm doing a whole installation in Linz, in Austria. I'll get into it a bit later. My first solo museum show called Keep Hope Alive. If I can tell anyone anything, I would just say never give up, never take no, and tenacity and perseverance and doggedness are the key to life, no matter what you do. It's just—
Since you're talking about this, before we get into tech, Linz. So it's in Linz, it's an installation. And
I'm making an installation that's a classroom in the vein
of— So it's boys.
In the vein of his Free International University. Yeah. I'm actually I created like seating elements and a lectern. I designed a lectern, and there'll be a video monitor. And that classroom will be an installation. That's one of 3 rooms that will constitute the show. That opens 5th of September. The other one is a mishmash of various new work and art from the recent past, and one or two pieces from 30 years ago.
So when you talk about recent work, you're talking about what? It's installation, it's performance.
Some of it is pretty fucking stupid. I'll be the first to admit it. But I mean, their sculpture, everything is pretty much derived from a digital file or words. Right. So I think aesthetically through pictures. And when you mention like, why do you collect art? It's corrupt, or there's something immoral about being. I consider myself aesthetic, as in the term denial, aesthetic, and materialist simultaneously. I love to be—
by materialism,
I coexist with art the way you read books. Every day during COVID, it was a tragedy. I got struck with it 3 times and suffered long-term effects. But every day before or after and during COVID, especially when I couldn't leave the house, I twist my nose up. I look at a work of art till it's pressing on my nose and touch it and handle it.
So you feed from the aura of the
I learned. No, I think it's an intellectual exercise in trying to read the art like you do text. I think you look at a piece of art, and if you live with it, and coexisting with art is one of the great gifts I've ever experienced in my entire life. Being able to live with pieces by Paul Thek, nothing major, Vito Acconci and Rachel Harrison, a younger sculptor, and I mean, it's a way of engaging in a very visceral, physical, and intellectual way that synthesizes all my interests, all my emotions, all my senses in a way that like I can't even express. It just
okay. So it's, yeah, okay. So it connects you with nature, with the embodiment,
more intellectual, also, more conceptual, with ideas.
But also with this
with ideas. It gives form to ideas. That famous show by Harold Zeman.
Right. So and Paul Thek, how does it end? Because Paul Thek, how would you define it with one word? If you have to choose a tag word for Paul Thek.
Well, I mean, I would say it deals with our vulnerability, the vulnerability of the visceral flesh of it. It deals with the fragility.
Okay.
The vulnerability.
Decay.
The vulnerability, yes, entropy, decay.
Okay.
And he was very Catholic, very religious, but he was also gay and smoked opium quite regularly, I would gather. I've never met him. But
I don't know much. I encountered it in my research about AIDS and about queerness. Yeah.
Well, people try to pigeonhole him as a queer artist, and you are what you are. I'm more interested in reading about the biography of an individual than hearing some art speak about Derrida or Lacan. I'm not interested in that. I can apply my own framework of analysis, although obviously I read this material, but I'm interested in the formative experiences that molded this particular artist or human being into the person they are.
So you have like a psychoanalytic approach to it.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
But again, like, the art that I have a poster by Paul Thek from 1966 of a meat sculpture. I have another gallery card, enlarged gallery announcement from the 60s, the Stable Gallery, one of the first shows that he had. And like I said, I hate hierarchies. I'm very, very hyper democratic, although like Clubhouse was the perfect concretization of an example of why pure democracy could never function.
What is Clubhouse?
Clubhouse was before Twitter Spaces, before all the shit that we're doing now. Clubhouse was a voice-only forum that people would stage discussions, and then you go like Twitter Spaces, it's akin to, but anybody could speak. So it became definite. I mean, everyone's voice was negated. When everyone speaks at the same time, you can't hear anything.
Yeah, you can't hear anything.
Nothing gets said.
So they give the voice to someone. They give the floor to someone.
Anybody could speak. Like in Twitter Spaces, you have to be allowed to speak or you'll get muted. But in Clubhouse, it was an utter free-for-all, like a cage fight of speakers. And it became.
And how does this relate to tech?
Who knows?
Okay. Yeah.
Where that was going. But
okay.
So
no, yeah. but what we were talking about.
He had a radical vulnerability. He had his own sense of Catholicism. But again, Paul Thek's career was defined by his work ethic, which was unrelenting. And
I imagine that if he was like Catholic, gay, and then he was quite internalized homophobia, he had a lot of guilt, and his ethics, work ethics, were a way of punishing himself.
He was pretty promiscuous, and I think he had a very laissez-faire notion of Catholicism and his sexuality, because I don't think he harbored any kind of misgivings about screwing around and doing what he did. He was very good looking. He was super good looking. He was very
Catholic too, you know.
Yeah, he was very good looking. He was even in some spaghetti westerns in Italy during the 60s. Yeah. And I mean, I'll get right into it. So what drew me initially when I first saw the work in the 90s was his meat sculptures. There was If you can get this book, it's called The Wonderful World That Almost Was. It's a catalog from the Witt de Witt Museum. It originated there, and then it went to the Kunsthaus in Zurich. There's another show coming up at the Kunsthaus next year. And
he's from where? He was born
from
where?
Pennsylvania.
American, okay.
And his family had zero interest or support throughout his entire life. But let me explain that, like, people equate, like, generally stupid people that are into today's version of what you may call art, which I call a hybrid of collectible toys writ large and accessories of fashion. But we're not going to go there. But Paul Thek died penniless, destitute. He was living he was working at a supermarket towards the end of his life, because he lived the majority of his career in Europe. Before social media, as impossible for many super young people today to recognize, when I used to try to communicate in artwork from one person to the other, without being in immediate proximity, you'd have to send a photographic reproduction in the way of a small slide, because we normally couldn't afford larger transparencies. The only way to communicate an image from someone outside of your immediate circle was to send a photographic reproduction in the mail. That was it. So Paul Thek had an exhibition, a few exhibitions in New York. By 1964, he had an exhibition at Pace Gallery, and he had some measure
of... you curated one in
yes, that was like from 1964 to like 2011 was the gap, and I reintroduced the work into that gallery in London. And if anyone comes to New York, because I don't feel like dealing with international mail and I'm too lazy, but if you're in New York, come to my house, come look at my collection, call me, I'll come pick up the book, I'll give you the catalog for free. I have a number of the catalogs from Pace Gallery. And again, like, anyone who wants to have a conversation that doesn't want to kill me, I'm amenable to carrying on this conversation in any way. People, I would say, for as long as anyone in this audience lives, because you'll probably all outlast me, you can DM me or send me a Twitter DM or contact me by any means, and I will always, pretty much within 24 hours, respond to you.
It's amazing.
It takes the same amount of time to say no or to ignore as it does to say yes. There's one parameter which I'm super strict about: basic manners from like a child.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
just say,
Marina Abramovich in Naples.
Yeah, but you would be so shocked. I mean, people call me and say, like, give me this, I want this.
Well, I mean, about that, I used to be very much like you. And what happens is that people take it for granted. I mean, it's very tricky. It's a very tricky strategy. So mostly in the South, because people are used to be like beaten up. So if you don't beat them up, you are like doing something weird. So let me go back to Paul Thek, because Paul Thek is kind of like Claude Cahun. It's one of those that it's like that art historians didn't know what to do with him.
Yes, that's such a great point. So smart. He was put into this exhibition in the Whitney called Eccentric Abstraction. Like, who the fuck calls an artist as a category of to systematize to describe their work as eccentric? That just means you're too stupid to take the time to appreciate it and understand it in a broader historical sense. And for me, these sculptures, which I'll first get into, as far as I'm concerned, they represent some of the greatest sculptural achievements in the 20th century, and have yet to be like exceeded. But he was.
This is all him.
Yes, he did get a little famous, micro, not in the big international sense. He had the show at Pace in '64, and he made 34 of these pieces referred to as the meat sculptures. They were called technological reliquary. And there's even though it's like the title is so prescient, it's unfathomable how pertinent it is to the world we live in. Someone even said that it could have been a nod to his name, Thek, and then the alliteration, or what's the word? That's not the right word. Anyway, so when he made these works, a total of 34, he overheard himself being referred to as the meat man, as the art world is so reductive. People are always looking for a way to classify you.
Yeah, but because they have to sell. It's about that for them.
Yeah, now, but I mean, then there was no art market. There wasn't even the glimmer that there could be a potential.
What year are we talking about? What year?
64, 63. The show at Pace was 64.
Yeah.
And he never made another one of those pieces again. Part of, in his writings, he specifically mentioned what he didn't like about the work was, even though I think the works themselves are about how, when you're a young person and you're running around the world, when you're running around going to bars and clubs and doing drugs, as you and I both engaged in,
don't use the past tense.
When I lost my child, I quit drinking and doing drugs 4.5 years ago. And it's the only regret I have in my life that I didn't do it sooner, because I was just sabotaging myself purposefully. I thought I loved smoking marijuana. I smoked it habitually for 40 years. I couldn't get out of bed without smoking as a mild form of an antidepressant. But when I lost my son, I just stopped because drugs had some kind of contributing impact on his life. And I couldn't look at them again. And once I quit, because I felt I had to, I realized ex post facto from hindsight that I never liked it. I was putting myself down to hurt myself on purpose.
It's numbing oneself, yeah. Because it's tough, life is tough.
And the drinking was the same. Drinking till you get sloppy and alienated half the universe that I work and live in is just ignorant. And I don't think I'm that stupid. I'm a little stupid, but not that. Anyway, we get further afield again.
No, but I want to ask you this. This is early 60s.
Yeah.
So this is just after, it's after Warhol. It's like after pop.
It's simultaneous. It's simultaneous with Warhol. And as you see here, there are two pieces, all these pieces, they're quoting. It's also like Marcel Broders, it's art about art in a way that really intrigues me. Here in the
like Broders, like art about institutions of art?
Yeah, no. So Broders made art about institution. Yeah. Paul Tech made, in a sense, some of the early conceptual forays into art about art as content, other people's art as forming. It was a critical response to Warhol, this piece directly in the middle of this image. And you see another critique of Donald Judd, explicit, which is very, very fascinating and unusual.
What is the critique?
Okay, so there are two critiques happening. One of them, this is an actual Warhol box that Andy, I say Andy like he was my pal, Warhol lent Tech a Brillo box that he requested. And maybe, you could see it here in the image in the middle. There's the opposite. So inside of the Brillo box is a shard of what looks like meat, flesh. That's why I say, like, when you're young and you go into bars and drinking, you think you're invincible. It's a immaturity, but it's also this kind of naive sense of invincibleness.
Right. So you have this Catholic reading on him.
Right. Oh yeah, he did liturgy and different ritualistic events in these further works I'll get into. And he also made a Tower of Babel, and all of these references to religion are permeate all of his work. But here you have two explicit references to art and his critique. The critique of pop art, which is pop art in the beginning. Like nowadays, everyone is so cynical. When you see a celebrity in a work of art today, it's usually to demean them, diminish them, and comment upon how we're so ignorantly, blindly obsessed with the cult of personality. That's what the art market is, a cult of personality. It's a fucking popularity contest. So here you see Paul Tech introducing a chunk of vulnerable cross-section of flesh into this Warhol celebrating consumerism. Warhol wasn't complaining about consumerism. He loved it. He loved it. He had the coolest line that I only just saw today in an interview where somebody said, he goes, don't you love when people buy your work, when they collect your work? when they live with your work, when they study it, he goes, and sell it.
Yeah.
Kind of cool. Nowadays,
Yeah.
if you resell a work of art, you're pariah in the marketplace.
But he's claiming some kind. I'm talking about tech. He's claiming some kind of lineage, because I mean, to have a work lent by Warhol and to do
I wouldn't say he meant it, because Warhol knowingly agreed to have the work defaced. Some would say the work was ruined. Well, I think this piece, which is in the Hirshhorn Museum, I think is one of the greatest art pieces I've ever seen to this day in my entire life.
And he's tumbling. He's defeating it. I mean,
it's like you're right. It's like some kind of a gesture of negation, like a master slave. Like he's basically consuming the Warhol to make his own expression, his own point.
And something that I see here, you're talking about Donald Judd.
On this piece, I don't see what the next slide. Okay, so here you specifically, this is such a direct quote of Donald Judd that
the color and the plastic.
Yes, the plexiglass. It's a complete direct. It wasn't accidental. It was a direct quote to Donald Judd's work. But this box, he's taking this vitrine, this impermeable, hermetically sealed. I mean, Judd would just show this yellow plastic box with nothing in it, and it would be sealed almost to the point that it's untouched by human hands. It shows no evidence of human interaction. It's void of any, it's manufactured. It's meant to be industrially produced and not to make any pretension or excuse for being what it is. A machine made, rendered, produced, fabricated object to be revered for its austerity.
There's something also futuristic about this. Something comes from another planet.
I mean, considering this is the early 60s, this work is so prescient and was so of its own world and its own, I mean, he created a new language. So now you see that he introduced this vein of flesh into this sealed, industrially fabricated item, although he handmade everything. So these are glued shards of plastic from Canal Plastics. But you see that the box sits within another box, like a sarcophagus or some kind of a ziggurat shape he's used before. Yeah. But if you notice, the inside of the box is pink.
Yeah.
He's feminine, disarming it of its penis-like machismo,
right.
Positioning and stance.
So would you have pink there? It's. I thought it was flesh. It's what is that?
It's formica, this really cheesy kind of like material used for the kitchen cabinets, but so it sits within this box, and the box opens up, and the box is white. So if the box is sealed, it looks like a Judd or something of the sort, very formal. And then when you open it opens up, like symbolically opens up, and it looks like some kind of shrine or some religious place where they would store a Bible or a Torah or some kind of religious script or something. And then inside this male obelisk kind of figure, which is opens up, and inside the interior is pink.
Yeah. Ivana, what do you have to say, Ivana?
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
now, what I was thinking is, it's a very phallic construction, and yet inside it's working as a womb, sort of like that. A pink substance feminizes it as a shrine-like, like you said, but also as a womb-like. So inside there's phallic contraction,
like the form of a vagina. Which
yes, exactly. Which is this opening. Yes, exactly. And
yes.
He's totemizing the vagina. It's like the mother for a gay guy. Anyways, carry on.
This is one of the most mysterious. I mean, even the world's foremost experts on Paul Thek, including the people from the estate. By the way, when he was on his deathbed from AIDS, and he died in 1988 at the age of 53, he had someone that was going to organize his estate, and then the theatrical impresario Robert Wilson stepped in and decided to take over from the person previously slated to run the estate. Robert Wilson stepped in to be the executor. And Paul Thek, on his deathbed, said, "This is the best thing that ever happened in my career."
I would never associate Robert Wilson with
Robert Wilson he was going to create a permanent study center in Watermill, where he has this giant, what do you call it? Like a group of buildings, a compound. He has like this, he built this performative shrine to himself and he has a collection of 10,000 things, Robert Wilson.
This is one question. What's the relation with AIDS? He gets AIDS in at what time? What year?
He got it in probably in the beginning, whenever it was first.
Okay, with AIDS.
He spoke about it.
82.
He spoke about it in the way Warhol spoke about it, like this gay cancer, which is Warhol did it. Warhol was so like prudish and so like wanted to shield himself for any exposure from anyone who had AIDS. He was very, like bourgeois and kind of just wanted.
He had his friend that I love, Jack Smith. Jack Smith is another artist that if I'm not mistaken, he was friends with Paul Thek. He was a performer, amazing film.
I know his work.
Yeah, Jack Smith.
Show of PS1 I saw. Great show of Red.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Jack Smith here too. I mean, that film, Flaming Lips, and that everything connects with everything. It's like everything is sex organically. I mean, there's something like these two things are kissing. The two, the organic conducts are connected.
Complete exposure. He's exposing what's inside onto the outside, onto this. You never see, like I was saying before, when you think you're in this invincible state where you can just do anything with no repercussions, no accountability. And
so you have it
ripping open the body, it's kind of like wounded, injured, like I said, like it's just flesh in its most basic.
But what I don't see is but I see a kind of celebration of that. No, I don't see the guilt here.
No, that's what I said before. I don't think he was living a gay life infused with any regrets. I think he celebrated, and also when he's coming out in the 50s, that wasn't like the normative way to be. When now, of course, in America, the polemics are pathetic and just retrograde, but it wasn't, he lived a very, he never hid or shielded his sexuality in any sense.
And what I see is there's a lot of closets all around, like the previous sculpture is
I'm not sure he spent much time inhabiting one in the symbolic way, in the metaphoric way. But this piece, for me, is one of the most perplexing. No one will ever know definitively the juxtaposition of this small metal chair. This sculpture is about 2 feet long and about 20 inches high, maybe a bit longer. And within the sculpture is a shelf in glass. Within this glass, like vitrine, there's another vitrine within a vitrine, like you see in this other piece. But here you see the plastic vitrine.
It's kind of like these dolls, Russian dolls, all the time.
Yeah. So here you see this hermetic metal chair, which is sitting. I mean, the skin almost looks shark-like. It looks like it could be a limb. It could be an apple. Whatever it is, the juxtaposition of the chair is one of the great artistic riddles that not.
You could also do it like a Lacanian or psychoanalytic reading of this, like the real and like the magma of sexuality and the repression. What emerges
Yeah, maybe the chair could be sitting in like confession for all we know.
Yeah.
All I know is that Paul Tech never fucking told anybody what it was, and nobody ever knew for sure what the significance and the import of this strange commingling of these disparate elements. That for me, this is, you know, yeah, it's one of the most extraordinary.
It's obvious. It's very, and it foresees it and it pre-announces other artists in the future, like Damien Hirst,
like Merritt Oppenheim and her pieces. Damien Hirst, I guarantee you, Damien Hirst was not even the least bit aware of Paul Tech. I think he played Jeff Koons basketballs. He didn't have the foresight. I mean, I think early Damien Hirst is pretty fucking brilliant and pretty profound. Now he's like a peasant. He's like affable. A shame because he's not dumb, obviously. You don't.
What he did in Venice at the Punta della Dogana, the Palazzo Grassi, it resounds very, very, very much with this. The one that the pieces of the wreckage.
Oh, that to me was shambolic. That was a travesty of.
I loved it.
Overproduction. Oh Lord.
I loved it.
Heaven have mercy on you, and I was beginning to really forge a liking for you.
No, but I tell you why I liked it.
I've made 25 critical videos over the last 10 years.
Really? I love that. I love that because I think there he becomes self-reflective, like about the institution, and he shows muscle at the way because the level
shows
financial muscle
of his bank account. I mean, the production is. The detail, it's I don't know. I find it a little bit shameful of our society and our culture. And
exactly, but I think that works.
Yeah, but he did some of these like coral-clad figures. One of them was like Mickey Mouse, and that to me is like when you're reaching like that groping for credibility, and I found that to be an insult.
But it was supposed to be like a thing for the.
I know exactly what it was supposed to be. I just did. Let's skip that subject because I don't want to waste the time.
Okay.
I don't want to bore everyone, whoever's here, the few people, into tears. But I don't know. This piece really moves me, and it's like an unsolvable riddle, intellectual riddle.
You don't know if they're having sex or they're like fighting. Which is that's what sex is about. Proper sex.
He's made cut off legs of a warrior, and he's used this kind of gladiator type symbolism of an ancient Roman like fighter.
This is 60s, no?
Yes, this is all 60s. It was he only made these pieces for about a year to 2 years, and then never. When he hurt himself, he never went back. He wrote in his diary that these pieces were too precious. He didn't want to create art that needed to be handled with such care and you know.
Yeah.
Here's another one with like wrapped in this skin, again with the meat.
It's flesh and steel.
But these steel needles stick into the meat through the glass. I mean, it's
like a giant worm.
But it also presages the whole fucking AIDS crisis and how this disease only affected gay people. I mean, that's already suspect somehow to me. But
and it also like this film that I think marked visually a whole generation. It's like Alien and the eighth passenger. You know, like that combination of the organic and the machine. Yeah. And he works with this like 20 years before. Yeah.
By the way, when he died, there was one small regional institution, a small museum in North Carolina, was the only institution in the United States that owned a piece, and it was a drawing. That was it at his death. Wow. Because he lived in Europe before the age of social media, it was most assuredly, it's a cliche, but out of sight, out of mind. When he lived in Europe, he became dead to America. He participated in all these international biennials. He always gave lip service and credited his collaborators. When he made these installations I'll get into, it was all about community and all about this hippie mentality of like, but he just worked his ass off on a regular daily basis, making these.
That I was wanting to ask you. It is you associate this with hippie, with beatniks, with what kind of what sociality was he inserted in?
in terms of
his creative friends. He was
he was a group of poets, performers, theatrical people, artists. His boyfriend was Peter Hujar, one of my favorite.
Oh wow, I love Peter Hujar.
So I contacted the estate of Peter Hujar, which was by the Columbia professor who wrote a book on Andy Warhol's films, Stephen Koch, and he gave me copies of all the correspondence. I mean, so Paul, they say that Paul got the idea for the meat sculpture when Peter Hujar was living in Italy, and he invited Paul to visit Palumbo, where the catacombs are, and Paul Tech famously touched a piece of fabric on this corpse in the catacombs, and it was a piece of flesh from the thigh.
Wow. This is in where did he invite it? Which catacombs?
In Palermo, in Italy.
In Palermo. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's a story that mirrors the story like Rauschenberg and Twombly. You know, the two of them in Italy getting creative through homosexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we get to this is a horrible slide, which came from the estate of, this is a body of work which I wrote an essay on. If anybody wants to read it, I'm more than happy to send it to you. I wrote an essay for a book published by MIT Press in 2009 for a show that went to the Reina Sofia before the Whitney show, and the ZKM in Karlsruhe, and Harold Falkenberg, the German Collectors Museum in Hamburg. And so I wrote an essay on the newspaper works called Nothing But Time, which was the name of the drawing. So this is a really, really pertinent and integral part of Paul Tech's creative life. Every day he tried to draw and paint, and he made this ongoing series of works on newspaper. Newspaper is the least archival, cheapest, accessible, throwaway material on the totem pole of you would have bronze up here, bronze and painting are neck and neck. Since art came off the wall of the cave, back to consumerism, art has been coveted by people to buy and collect since it dislodged from the cave wall. But even to this day, even though we live in a digital renaissance and there was a brief moment of NFT market dominance, now it's it always reverts back to painting. People want to collect canvases. Why? Because they're easy to hang, but more importantly, they're easy to store and easy to transport. And rather than making canvases, which Paul did in the very early stages of his output, some extraordinary paintings on canvas, the one constant in his creative life were these works on newspaper. And in a way, he was living abroad. The only way to stay in touch with what was going on back home in the United States was through newspapers, and he would read the Herald Tribune. So he made this series of this is an extraordinary work called The Mind as the Clitoris. And it was during a period where at the forefront of artistic taste was Julian Schnabel, who he believed in the scale somehow conferred quality. It was never that was too big for his ambitions. And oftentimes his ambition exceeded his talent, even though he's made some good paintings. Anyway, at this period when Paul was ill and toiling away for peanuts, he made what he referred to as awful art. He was reacting to the terrible art.
This is what years? This is 70s or 80s?
No, this 82.
82, because you're talking about Schnabel. Yeah, 82.
No, this is, I'm talking about Schnabel, late 70s to 80s, until he became the first. So
he's reacting to, because the 80s are Reagan and the return of the market.
That's the first time contemporary art ever had a taste of covetability in the commercial art marketplace.
And he's clearly reacting to that.
Neo-expressionists, Clemente, Sandro Chia, Enzo Cucchi, Schnabel, Of course, in Germany would still be like Kiefer and
Polke.
Polke is another story because he doesn't really have a.
Well, but this is very much linked to Polke. I mean, the previous one, it's very much linked to that kind of
there's also a degree of experimentation and curiosity. These are things that are most thwarted in the art world, in the art market. The art market affirms or embraces what's been proven successful to date. They don't want to, if you're an artist flitting, so Paul Thek and Vito Acconci, two of my heroes, they flitted. They were never complacent. They never settled on, when Paul Thek became well known for one body of work, he swore it off and never repeated it. I mean,
what artists are making. No, what I love about this one are two things. I'm fascinated by this one because the pigment doesn't exhaust the paintings, the paintable surface. First of all, it's not an efficient painting, but it's a self-failed painting, and then
striving for.
Yeah, that thing of the.
But this concept, the concept of the mind as the clitoris. So the clitoris is among, not that I have one,
and that's not the clitoris.
It's among the most. It says the mind as a clitoris. That's the title.
But to me, what we're seeing is actually a mouth. So
it looks like it's a portrait of a person, but it also has a clitoris
or a throat.
Yes.
Also,
but he's depicting a clitoris. He's stating that fact, and that's. But I think, first of all, he writes it backwards, so that obscures it and makes you pay attention.
Yeah.
And then, if you think about one of the most sensitive bits of a human being, the clitoris, and saying the mind as the mind for him, even though he had the technique of an old master. I'll show you, but he had the tech. I'll show you, but
Philip Gaston. There's a lot of Philip Gaston.
Yeah. He could render, but that was before Guston's. Maybe when Guston also used some of the same coloration in his abstraction before his figuration. But I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, he had the prowess, the technical. Back to Damien Hirst because he's such a guidepost for idiocy. When he decided to become a painter after he had already conquered conceptual sculpture, I call them had-it maids instead of ready-mades. He said when he painted, he had a painting exhibition in the Wallace collection, which he bought his way into by funding their renovation. He said that anybody could learn to paint like Rembrandt. And if anything, he's disproved his theory more than any argument could by his own later works. Anyway, forget that. So Paul Thek could draw. He could make renderings that were they were masterpieces, and the prowess.
And this is for 82. 82 is the beginning of AIDS.
But back to his drawing skill. Before he made these shitty looking paintings, is what I'm trying to say. He could draw with a precision like an architect, like an engineer. Right. And he had this ability. How do you get that ability? Not like Damien Hirst deciding you're going to be Rembrandt. No, you get it by working every day, relentlessly.
Like practice. Practice makes perfection.
Practice.
Exactly.
Practice. So this is another one.
Oh, wow.
The mushroom and these flowers.
This also is a nod. It's kind of like rejecting the market, but nodding the market.
No, I think it's rejecting the market because no one wants to fucking work on newspaper that you could see is deteriorating and yellowing. This was his framing method, which was again non-archival, to sandwich a piece of fickle. He painted on newspaper for a reason. He was pursuing an art making with material that's commonplace, cheap, accessible, and
from below,
and not precious.
Yeah.
And another important ingredient was it almost reads like an illustration to a newspaper. So he's inserting himself into history, into the times he was living in, back into America where he was all but ignored and forgotten. And in a way, it's a really cool way of like putting yourself into a history book by situating yourself within the words and images of his time. And that it's anchored to whatever the date is. It's anchoring itself. This is 1969, so this was something that was a thread of continuity throughout his whole life, and it's also fucking beautiful. Like my only yearning in my artistic life is, why can't I ever create something that's beautiful? I just
it has that vitality, and also the flood, the failure of the unfinished also. So it's for an American.
Not fully resolved. Yeah. But in a sense, like he could paint this on canvas and it would sell for 10x and it would immediately sell, than being on a yellow deteriorating newspaper. Like de Kooning mounted his newspaper works, or maybe he didn't, but there's no sense of preservation for posterity. It's about the moment, about making a comment.
And it's about decay too, because what you said, this is going to decay and disappear.
So he had a tenement, a rent-controlled apartment. This was back when he came back to New York after living decades abroad. He came back to New York and he always kept a rent-stabilized apartment on 6th Street or 7th Street. And from the rooftop where he gardened, he had a view of the World Trade Center towers. Now, he did 3 versions of this painting. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the one that's shocking, because it has, you see this painting flanking the image of the window pane. So here he's looking out of his apartment, or he often painted on the rooftop buildings. There's another version of this painting where there were 2 comically drawn potatoes with the symbol of that indicates, like in a cartoon, with the imagery that indicates falling potato, a hot potato.
Wow.
So in a way, and I think, look, if you look at top, what do you see on top of the World Trade Center? Cranes. Yeah. So they were just being finished. So when he was painting 2 falling hot potatoes, it's not that he was a soothsayer or a psychic portending the World Trade Center collapse, but to him, they were symbolic. They were emblematic of this kind of capitalism writ large, where you have no regard for city planning, no regard for the environment. It's this machismo act creating these 2 ginormous, penile-like structures that dominate the landscape, dominate the horizon. It's a matter of showing like the superiority of America, the superiority of New York, building these shrines to just, the human accomplishment of engineering and construction. Apparently they weren't engineered well enough to withstand.
But the window is also like the clitoris, no? Because it's the hymen of the Virgin. It's the
so like a passage to another. But anyway,
the virginity.
The one with the 2 falling potatoes is insane. It's one of the most extraordinary works. And you see that the way he treated his canvases, you could see on the bottom portion, it's covered in stains, dirt, footprints. I'll never forget. Like, I don't even want to go there, but this is a 9-foot canvas with, I guess, I'm not sure. I think oil. I'm not sure what. He also has that kind of Gustin-esque abstraction, like expressionism on the bottom portion, with this kind of landscape configuration and combining again that unfinished. And you can't see in pencil above the window is a pencil drawing of the Liberty Bell, this historic monument in America, in Philadelphia. And
I'm thinking also about like the minimalism and those two rectangles at the bottom.
He also didn't use the canvas like this elevated art form. He just walked all over it, stained it, washed his paint brushes on it. This is a small pencil drawing from 1965 of a brain. And you could see he used these perspectival lines to create this rendering. And you could see the lines pierce the image plane. And this is a pencil graphite drawing of a brain with it looks like a medical illustration with its specificity.
Yeah.
It's just
And he has a thing for frames.
Yes, in a formal way, definitely. Yeah, and also
but
like
the previous one, the mind as
the mind as the clitoris and the brain. I mean, he's really living. He aestheticizes pure ideation by like using the thought process itself as the manifestation of what he's thinking about.
So your take on this is like a illusionistic representation of conceptualism.
Yes. What is for him above all else, art, even though he was very much into drawing and making like these wonderful disparate images on paper, many times they were simply beautiful, in the simple as that.
Yeah.
This is another, like, it looks like the concentric squares, rectangles, Albers. And
it's what is
1965, knife, 1965. It's on board graphite, and you can see there's 3 concentric rectangles surrounding the knife. The first one is the color of the board. I don't know if it was primed. Then there's another rectangle which is lightened in relationship to the more denser application of pencil in the middle, and sitting within it is this knife.
Wow.
And it's drawn, I mean, in a way that most people could never replicate.
I wonder whether this has to do with his in dialogue also with Italy, with what's the name? The one that lives in Argentina.
The cuts, Fontana.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, because of
I don't know. Interesting. Can't answer that.
Yeah.
So then he did, I mean, like someone like Picasso was such an anomaly because again, he was this macho, you know, Hercules, like he was godlike in the breadth of his body of work. Picasso could have been the world's foremost sculptor. He could have been the world's foremost ceramicist. He could have been the world's celebrated printmaker. His paintings, obviously, but whereas Picasso was embraced in his lifetime, super successful financially, Paul Tech died penniless. And in this case, these are a series of sculptures he's made. And these are mice on these, like, you know, one was called the Tower of Babel, and all these kind of symbolic structures made in clay and cast in bronze.
Hold on. And those, what year is the previous one? It's like
they're
after
all,
Lucy
they're
Lippard.
all 60s, all after the meet, I would say 70s, maybe late
70s.
60s,
Wow.
maybe late 60s.
Very early for that.
Well, yeah. And this is a series of 23 bronze mice. They have humor. I mean, he had an element of humor in his work somehow.
Yeah, but the humor that gays used to hide.
There's also the references of mice in any biblical text or literature.
Yeah.
And here's just, I mean, they have such character, each one its own personality, and they're wonderful.
Yeah. So I wonder what
the way he just jumped from one, and then go ahead. You wonder if I'm sorry.
No, I wonder whether I'm interested in you being drawn to him, because these are images of, he's a very sophisticated artist, clearly. He's ahead of his time all the time. I mean, with the post-minimalist, this last thing that you show, but they're very, it's almost like dream images from below. You know, like it's like the newspaper, the mice, the things that are down there, except when he paints the mind. That the mind is something that he paints it as below too. So I wonder what attracted you to him. What drew you to him?
I mean, I always say, and this, I first wrote this and thought of this in relationship to Paul in an article I wrote in the 90s for a Mexican magazine, Polyester. The only thing worse than being behind the time is to be too far ahead of the time. And that's what he suffered throughout his entire career. Right. And I love the way that he's self-wrought. Like he just created, there was no precedent for what he did. It was completely, like you say, from deep down, from within, from his subconscious. And applied these through his perseverance and work ethic, all of the success. I mean, he wasn't terribly successful in his lifetime, but he was in Documenter and in a lot of these international biennials. And that was all through this. Like, I love the way he he was always challenging himself intellectually, creatively. He never settled for one. I mean, like I said, the only thread of continuity in his work is his newspaper works, but he flitted between, I mean, the art world, success affirms success. Nobody wants the news.
It's kind of like you.
Everybody wants, yeah, but I suck compared to him. I wish.
No, but I'm talking about, like, in terms of almost as socials. He was boyfriend of Peter Ruger. Yeah. That was a very household name in the gay community, and in a very specific, in the Chicago School of Photography. So he was very well positioned. So that means that this guy was not marginal. This guy was at the center of. Yeah.
But he was always an outsider because his work couldn't be compartmentalized, and the art world despises that. They want the same. Look at Warhol. I mean, he didn't vary much once he introduced the silk screen into his mechanical.
Well, but Warhol had these two sides to him. They're very, very, very sclerotic, because from one side you have that, and the other side you have his videos, like the guy.
Yes, I take that back. That was dumb. I love Warhol and revere him, and I think that Warhol is.
But it's kind of like split personality, Warhol.
But I guess I'm just talking about the fact that Warhol was so commercially minded. He embraced money and business and strove. In his lifetime, his auction record was 280 grand. He was considered a failure by the time of his death. He did this TV show called The Love Boat. He was doing TV commercials, and I mean, he was making these society portraits in Palm Beach for 25 grand a pop. And he had in the same way Keith Haring was eviscerated because he opened up this pop shop on Lafayette Street. He democratized, he made high art accessible, or his graffiti became high art. And then he went back into the street and put it on t-shirts and skateboards. And he was completely ostracized by the commercial art world in the way Warhol was, for the reasons they should have been downright elevated. And it was the opposite.
It sounds like he was cultivating as a project the queer art of failure.
I think, yeah. I mean, for me, it's always human. I hate generalizations, but obviously that's where he's coming from on a personal level, and his biography. And sure, everything figures into the equation, of course.
I'm talking about like this amazing art of failure, because I'm talking about that. Yeah. In terms of like, we are born.
Well, that's like Mike Kelly. Mike Kelly I think success killed Mike Kelly because he dwelled in the land of failure, and a large part of his work was about this kind of suburban culture and being, ostracized and dominated by the kind of more mainstream. And then
there's a difference between
Mike successful. The studio practice killed him.
But there's a difference between Mike Kelly and this, because Mike Kelly
Mike Kelly loved Paul Peck and wrote about him.
But Mike Kelly staged very efficiently. Mike Kelly gave you what you wanted. I mean, you wanted abject, he gave you abject.
Yeah, but he said, he had a great quote where he said his work is like aesthetic negativism. He knew he had a very dark side, of course, and cynical side, and very critical about. But
the negativism, he gives it to you. This is
a lot of work is pretty harsh. Using dirty stuffed animals. No one thought that they would be collectible. They're pretty.
No, I know. But at the end of the day, there are things that can be collectible, but this cannot. This is kind of like half baked.
I'd love to own everything he ever made in his entire.
I know, but it's.
By the way, he also made this piece. Paul Peck made this piece called The Tomb, which, like that Formica piece with the pink inside, he made this giant, like, colossal ziggurat that you would see as a Mayan rune in South America. He made this very enlarged, like, architectural, sculptural environment, and it was pink. So he took this kind of like heroic architectural feat of human ingenuity, and then he turned it pink. So again, he's introducing these elements that you don't associate at that time with this grandiose male characterized work. I mean, Zaha Hadid became one of my closest friends her work killed her. She didn't have to work twice as hard as a man to achieve.
I remember her friendship with her. I have forgotten.
10 times as hard as a man. And how did she die prematurely at 65? She worked herself to death. I witnessed it. We had lunch every day for years and traveled all over the world together. And I just loved her confidence and assuredness. And her work ethic was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Paul Thek made this ziggurat, pink inside, and inside the ziggurat, lying on the floor, was this effigy of himself created in latex. And
are you showing it? No.
I don't have a slide. I forgot.
Okay.
And sorry, and
no.
Fine, but it became colloquially known as the death of a hippie because he has long hair and he's lying. What's the word when you're lying on your back? Prostate. Prostate.
Yeah.
So
like what we have.
Yeah. So he's lying on his back, his arms flayed, and his fingers are cut off and part of his tongue. So it's the emasculation of the artist. The artist is being sacrificed in this altar of this male, heroic, historically grandiose architectural structure, painted pink, and inside there's the artist, but he's sacrificed.
Right. Do you want to?
And then he couldn't pay his storage fees, and the piece got thrown away and destroyed.
This I find it fascinating because he's an artist of the discard of the. He's an artist. His works are like human beings that you have to mourn and to pass. Yeah,
amazing. He did these series of picture light paintings, so he's quoting bourgeois, petit bourgeois kind of picture. This painting is no more than 12 inches on the big dimension, and it has this light connected to it, so it's almost like you would see in a non-art person's art collection. Yeah. And again, the bad painting, then mocking the way you would see on a constable or something, you would see a brass plaque on a coveted collectible, on a painting.
I wouldn't call it bad painting.
Well, that's how he specifically referred to it.
He referred to it as bad painting.
Someone that could make a rendering like the knife and then paint something like this, which is just kind of dismissive of the very act of painting. It's intentional.
Right. This is from what year?
This was from the 80s. But let me also explain, when you see, if you've ever seen when you go to a supermarket, I'm sure they don't do this anymore. I'm dating myself, how old I am. But they had this little machine, and you would press out the letters in this machine, and it makes a little piece of sticky tape. And that's how they would price items in a supermarket. So if you look beneath the painting, emulating the bronze plaque denoting its authorship, he has the title of the painting, number 13, in this shitty, again, exactly like you said, this disposable, on the kind of hierarchy of materials, taking this fancy frame from years past, another era, and then sticking this number 13 on a shitty sticker from a grocery store.
Another error. I like that. Error. It's calculated error.
He did a meat sculpture celebrating Ringo Starr. And if you think about it, what is Ringo Starr most famous for? It's being the loser of the Beatles. He was the Harpo Marx. He was the failure of the four most celebrated rock stars of their era. John Lennon equated himself with God and caused this.
And this is the number that no one wants.
So Paul Thek did a piece about he celebrated the least admired Beatle in the Beatles,
and the least admired number.
Yeah, and also there's anathema against number 13. It's bad luck. It has all this kind of taboo, and it's the
He's like the child that no one wants.
Yeah,
the number 13.
This is something which, if you're in the audience, all three of you, you should screenshot this. But you should just, if Paul Thek taught at Cooper Union when he was completely broke from 78 to 81, and he famously made this list of questions that it was imperative that all of his students answer these questions. Do you believe in abortion? Do your parents? What is your worst physical feature? I mean, today you would be thrown out of the fucking school for teaching this, but it was so invasive on a personal level. What's the main source of difficulty between your parents, your teachers, your friends? What annoys you the most about others? All of these probing. And like you say, it all relates back to the psychological. You should just download on Google Paul Text questionnaire for Cooper Union. And it's readily available for free. And
Cooper Union, explain to a little bit Cooper Union to the Latin American.
First of all, it was free up until like 5 years ago. And it's one of the foremost schools for art study in the world, one of the best art schools.
Yeah.
What is the most difficult thing in life for you? I'm just randomly reading this. Can art be useful in dealing with the most difficult part of your life? What is service? What is the purpose of society and government? What is the surest way to happiness?
There's something, the word, it also inscribes as an object into the calligrams, the calligrams by Apollinaire and by Duchamp, if I'm not mistaken. And also the structure is very much like minimalist. Like at the beginning of minimalism.
This is just a copy of the questions. It wasn't.
But he puts them like this, or what?
But you have to read. No, he just presented the questions. What is attractive in a woman, a man? What qualities of physique are most attractive? What are the personality problems of being an artist? What is it like to be in America in the 20th century?
The questions, he read them, or it was performative?
No. This was an assignment to all of his students to answer all of these questions.
Right.
Design a feminist crucifixion. Do something to sell on the street corner. Design something to sell to the government. Design something to put on an altar. Design something to put over a child's bed. Design something to put over your bed when you make love. Make a monkey out of clay. Design a flying saucer as if it was the Ark. He made a whole piece on Noah's Ark, a series of prints. I mean, they're just the coolest, most crazy, eccentric. It is eccentric, not to use that stupid term, but paint a balloon gold, paint a balloon silver, make a necklace out of coal. It's like this exercise in futility, in absurdity.
And also,
it's a psychological profile of all that's what he's gunning for.
And also there's the repetition, and that design, it's reminiscent of, and I think it might have to do with 10 years before, at Woman House.
What do you think of the qualities of a life fully lived? I mean, what is greed? What is verbal knowledge? What does tactile mean? Can you show an example of tactile sensibility in your personal life?
Can I give you like a key to this?
Yes.
Because Woman House, there was this Paraguayan American.
What is that? What is Woman House?
Woman House is the founding place for, I think it's a place that changed contemporary art, the art of the last 50 years. And it was founded by Miriam Shapiro, and in SoCal, in Southern California University, and it was the beginning of feminism in art. And
I just got into a fight with Martha Rossler today, the 80-year-old feminist.
Martha Rossler, I love her. And there was a performance by this Paraguayan American artist, very famous. It's called Waiting, and
Lygia Clark or something.
What?
Lygia Clark.
Wait,
there's I don't know. It doesn't matter. Keep going.
No, it was Faith. Okay, Faith. Something like the name of the artist, and she repeats. It's about like what a woman does in a man world. It's waiting and repeating, and this has a lot of that repetition of verbs, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about this: where is the art? The art is the performance. This
is a revelatory exercise in an artist. For me, making art is self-expression, But a masterpiece no, I'm not done. It's self-expression and communication. This is communication. So when I say self-expression, an artist, to be a good artist, has to reveal, like Bruce Nauman wrote, a great artist reveals mystic truths. An artist has to look within to speak.
I don't believe in that. I mean,
an artist has to look within to relate, to communicate. I mean, for me, art is communication. This is a fundamental exercise in human interaction and intercourse, intellectual intercourse. What do you do to make yourself sexually attractive? Why do you do this? Do you like beautiful people? Do they have a special privileges? What is polygamy? Explain its function in society. What do you think of money? Make a structure. Explain to me your concept of money or out of money.
Yeah.
I mean, this is amazing.
He's deconstructing structuralism, Levi-Strauss, like the concept of the anthropology concept of society.
Yeah. And it's also like taking an artist who's in an esteemed art college and forcing them to open up in a way you would do in psychotherapy.
Like it starts from zero.
Yeah, and forcing you to share some very personal things that ordinarily you would be reticent about. It's about exposure. The way he exposed the flesh, here he's exposing your subconscious and
freedom and freeing them, because I mean he goes to places
he's forcing them to go.
Yeah.
Design a labyrinth dedicated to Freud using his photo and his writings. I mean, I'm making these associations about Freud and psychoanalysis, and then I'm just randomly picking out excerpts from this document, and and there's one on design a Torah,
It's an amazing artist.
Illustrate the Godhead, add a station to the cross, design an abstract monument to Uncle Tom, that racist symbolism. What's a good temple? What's a bad temple? Who's your favorite character in the Bible? Who's your favorite character in Gone with the Wind? Okay, I'll stop. Anyway,
no, it's about the construction of society. It's how do you construct collectivity, and apart from the individual. And
like we spoke about performance. That performance doesn't always necessarily have to be what you would the art dictionary of performance, a happening. But here, this is a perfect segue to this next body of work. And again, like you look at, he foresaw installation art. This is among the first iterations of scatter art that it's sculpture in a way, but it's non-fixed. Again, it's ephemeral materials. It's ritualistic. It's
ritualistic
aspects of the Bible. There are rabbits and all these. There's a whole amazing show he had in the Institute of Contemporary Art in Philadelphia in 1977. Susan Delahanty, I remember it. Susan Delahanty wrote one of the most dense. She wrote an explication of all of the religious symbolism in all of the renderings and it's a book you can find online, The Processions at the Institute of Contemporary Art by Susan Delahanty, and it's extraordinary.
And here people could get into the place, and we could get into this building.
Yes, you go through this like bridge over. But anyway, the fact is, like, he listed his collaborators, which was a crew of like a band of collaborators that he repeatedly worked with. He gave them credit, which was unusual, despite, like, when you think of the artist has this, in the what do you call it, in the attic, but what's the other, in the garret, making the art, the lone genius. So he's debunking the myth of like a lone genius artist. He's making art that gets made in situ. It wasn't preconceived.
Yeah, but he still signed him.
Yes, but it was like he was invited to be in an exhibition, and he chose to work with other people and not just take the credit for it. He shared authorship, most decidedly.
Okay, we like him.
And he did ones, this is called like Bombs and Bunnies. So it was already in the 80s, right, shortly before his death. And he's making overtly political art, this kind of like sculpture, but more fleeting, non-fixed, non-monumental.
Right. like destructive art too, like that Viennese.
Taking apart all these myths and monuments. This was the Tower of Babel. That's out of context.
Or like what's the name of the? There's Donald Judd. The other one, Keith. The other one, the lights.
Dan Flavin.
Yes, Dan Flavin. The Monument to the International Communist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. Yeah. So this is.
That's him. Come on.
When you see him before this, he was actually in movies and did TV commercials. The fact that he was physically gorgeous. I mean, not to be reductive, but this is when you see him before this. This is already in the '60s. When you see him in the '50s, he looks like a movie, like he was a movie star. Dude, he was extraordinarily handsome.
How old is he? Is here?
Here, I would say 30, early 30s, 34.
Wow. Yeah. He was American from. This is a Norwegian.
Pardon?
From Norwegian family. He's Scandinavian.
Oh, I can't answer that.
No. So we can go back to how we finish here. We can.
This was the show I did. If you want the catalog, I don't know. I don't feel like going to.
I saw this one.
Come to my house and I'll give you the catalog.
I saw this one. This is with what was the name of the director?
Go back to what? Go back to what?
No. I wanted to. Don't worry.
I mean, he made this comment. He made this comment. There's nothing but time. So that was the name of my essay on his new. I wrote specifically on his newspaper works. For this MIT book, and my title of my essay was Nothing But Time. And nothing but time means I have all day. I have an endless, bottomless amount of time to kill.
It was a beautiful, beautiful show, eh?
I think. But also, nothing but time means that's all there is to existence. There's only time. It's fixed. It's finite. We have a short period of time alive. Life is short. I mean.
Yeah.
So when he said there's nothing but time, he was speaking metaphysically, like all there is time. That's all we have. We have an allotted, finite, ever decreasing amount of time to make the best out of it, to fill it with work, to fill it with what constitutes joy for you. He achieved self-worth and joy through work. We could also say that time, temporality in his work is fundamental. They're almost like performative in this sense that they have an expiry date. You know, the materials that brought them. Said, yeah, exactly. We have an expiry date. The meat piece is about an expiry date. The newspaper works have a shelf life. Duchamp said art should have a fixed period of being in the collection of a museum. That art should have a shelf life and be temporary.
He doesn't claim like immortality.
Everyone claims immortality in the art world, but once you're dead, you're dead. And for all you know, the world is fickle, and you could be dismissed as much as celebrated.
Yeah.
I mean, make the best. For him, making the best of his life was to fill his days, day and night, with incessant toiling, in the biblical sense of, being godly.
You know that I didn't know almost anything about this artist, and I think it's fantastic. It has a lot to do with AIDS, a lot to do with the finitude of life, and a lot to do with elasticity of time too.
He was dealing with those issues decades before AIDS, but definitely in his
is particularly interesting how he felt a zeitgeist, because it's almost like his work comes from the 80s, but he was doing it in the 60s.
Amazing point. Even in the 90s or today.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, actually.
He also had towards the end of his life, he had some mental issues. Some of it, I'm sure, was brought on by being ill, but he had these conspiracy theories that people were trying to destroy his career. He agreed to do a show with Richard Flood, was a curator of the Walker Center, a great Museum of Contemporary Art in Minnesota. But before that, he was the director of Barbara Gladstone. He chose to work with Paul Thek to do an exhibition in the 80s. And then Paul Thek changed his mind mid-course. And when the truck came to pick up the work, he acted like he wasn't home. And he never opened the door. So he ended up not authorizing the exhibition. But because it was slated in the calendar, they followed through with the exhibition with what they had. But Paul never acknowledged the show.
Cultivating failure. No,
I think in the end, like
it's kind of that's his project, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, like
he did so fabulously successfully in his output.
Yeah, because success means a different thing for him.
Anyway, so that's Paul Thek. You know, I would say in a nutshell, but I went on way too long for you to call that a nutshell.
No. I mean, it's been a pleasure. Let's go back
to. It's funny how you seized on him because it coincides with so many aspects of what seems to interest you. So I'm sure it wasn't fortuitous. You obviously
absolutely, and I'm thinking of either showing this or inviting you to because I'm the convener of the Queer Futures committee in the International Federation of Theater Research and Performance Studies. So which is a big organization, and Paul Thek, I mean, it's completely performative. This is actually the work.
He even performed in his friend's theatrical events as an actor.
Yeah, this work.
And now it's his connection to Robert Wilson because of the avant-garde.
Exactly. The connection with Robert Wilson. It's very interesting. I think you can pass me I cannot do it myself. You can pass me.
Let me just do this quickly.
Yeah.
This will coincide with everything we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
This was a piece I made in the mid 90s or 99, I should say. And because once I found out that
this is you.
Yes. When I was young.
Wow.
Once I found out in 1990 that art could be a vocation and a job, a profession, which I had no knowledge of on any basis. No level did I understand that you could sell art and have a career in the fine art world. I thought artists were these secreted away actors that I used to think the art world was full of like absinthe drinking, people swinging from the chandelier and going to orgies. Little did I know that the art world is more conservative than any of the 7 different fields I worked in prior to my literally stumbling into Sotheby's to kill time. I was procrastinating. And once I found out, I went to my first gallery, Herschel and Adler in 1988, and I will never forget the feeling of alienation, the preconceived judgments that were like lauded on me. I will always, even though I'm up to my neck in the art world, up to my forehead, I will always consider myself to be outside of the mainstream or outside the kind of gated community of the art world, of the organized professional art world. And because I started to make art immediately upon being exposed to it outside of a museum. I set about making it, and then I started to curate shows. And part of the reason I began curating my peers, or also older artists that fell through the cracks or never were embraced or underexposed. An emerging artist could be 100. So,
but you ended up like very much like inside the system. I mean,
yes, but
you were best friend with Hadi.
People dismiss me. They look at. I'm like considered to be an intruder.
But you are well known. But you're well known. You know that when I was talking to some,
I didn't say I'm obscure. Artists, I'm ubiquitous.
Yes.
That's just from like the advent of social media and me exposing myself.
Well, but
anyway, let
probably
me
you are the new. But this is you created a new world, like a new system.
So I started to curate these shows. I could say now because it's a little bit self-aggrandizing, but I started my curatorial work in order to contextualize the shit that I was making amongst my peers that were professional artists that had gone to art school. I took a drawing class in law school. I took a sculpture class in law school because I never went. And then the first art history class I ever sat in, I was teaching drunk, a little bit drunk, at the New School. I was teaching, I started a conceptual art class based on Hogarth. I bought Jansen's book of art history, the cursory book every freshman in art history reads. And I bought that book and then started from reading that book. I would read 3 chapters and then drink a beer and regurgitate it with my own twisted outsider mentality and teach those 3 chapters. Anyway, so I began.
Yeah, but we talk about teaching in the New School. We're talking about like being friends.
Listen, I rocked up
like that.
I rocked up to the New School in 1992. I teach to learn, and I write to get a deeper understanding of the day-to-day art life, the minutiae of being in the art world. So I taught because I realized it was early 90s. I curated my first show in 90 of German art, and then I curated a show. Anyway, I realized like I can't have an art life unless I know the building blocks of art history. I never took an art class. I could teach anyone off the street contemporary art history, post-war art in 6 months because nobody reads really. And
can we pass to you?
Yeah, but let me just say that like, wait, so I went to the New School and I met the dean, and he said, what school did you go to? What art school did you go to? I said, I never went to art school. And he hired me on probation for 6 lectures, and I started teaching art history. And then by the time I finished my 6 classes on probation, that dean had left the New School, and I was on the books as an adjunct professor. Anyway, I did this piece because the singer Prince, the musician, he was in an oppressive record deal with Sony, and he was releasing so many records, and the music company refused to publish all of his music and let him record them under the label because they thought that he was making so much music prolifically that one record would cannibalize the sales of another. So he wanted to break the contract, and he couldn't. So he never used to leave his house for a year without the word slave written on his face. And in no way am I being flippant or saying something that's insensitive or blind to the reality of.
And that's the Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich also worked very much like this. Like
Prince didn't write that word on his face to comment upon the oppression of slavery. It was about corporate dominance and oppression through financial situation. Anyway,
the profile.
Right. So because I began my career curating shows and simultaneously making art, the only way I could make a living to not have I worked as a part-time photographer at Gagosian after I graduated law school, after I curated a few shows.
A part-time photographer for Gagosian?
Huh?
A part-time photographer for Gagosian?
No, I just worked for a photographer who shot all these shows. Anyway, the only way I could make a living was to stage exhibitions of my peers. Then I got to put my work. I showed Cecily Brown, for instance, the first group show she was ever in. I showed Joe Bradley, Catherine Bernhard, Janine Antoni, Andrea Zattel, Wade Guyton, the artist who uses computer printing techniques. He was in the first, I curated his first show in 97. He didn't have a printer, and I was making these giant computer prints. Anyway, I got branded in the most dismissive way as being, because I was a dealer in the language of the art world, in the nomenclature that they go by. I couldn't be a polymath. I couldn't hyphenate myself. If you were a dealer, then you were a dealer, compartmentalized, and no one, that's why my writing was dismissed and my art is.
Okay.
This was a comment on it in 1999.
Right. It's kind of like that, no? In life in general, in the market, it's like that.
Yes, in the art world, it is so. The art world operates, the business model of the art world is Lloyd's of London in 1760. They operate on like 2 white rich men, old, sitting in a room, shaking hands over a drink at a table, and that's the way they consummate deals and business.
Yeah, and if you start
even though the gates have opened to accessibility for artists of color, artists of different orientations, in all walks of life. Yes, the market cynically goes to Africa, goes to Ghana and brings back artists to crack the market. At the same time, 2% of artists in all international museums is women to this day. And on the commercial side, or, you know, it's still largely unchanged, the same as it ever was. The most conservative field I've ever seen in my adult life.
Let's open the floor to see if there is some any questions. I mean, pass me the host to open.
So this is an image. This is an image from my upcoming show, and
I love this image.
An Irish friend of mine had a racehorse which was doomed to fail, but it was called Keep Hope Alive. And okay.
Hold on, but this is the last image of you?
Yes.
Because I love that image.
Yeah, oh, thank you. So the name of my show is Keep Hope Alive, because the whole basis of my career is I never, even though I have low self-esteem, I lack confidence, I'm pretty much inadequate in most things I do, unprofessional, blah, blah. But
that's a lie, that's not true.
I always kept, when I lost my son, I gave up drugs and alcohol, and it was through art. There's been medicinal studies that living with art can reduce anxiety and decrease depression. If it wasn't for art and my children, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be a fucking mess.
Should we do a 2-minute break? We
Sure.
go to the bathroom, we drink something.
I go on. My problem is I can run on for 3 hours.
And everybody, the ones that are here, because I think I sent the invitation somewhere, to another room. The ones that are here, the camera, please, immediately. So in 2 minutes we reconvene. Okay, we go to the bathroom.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I just say thank you to everyone in this room and to you? Because I know we started out on the wrong foot. Are you gone? You're gone.
The internet, sorry, sorry, Kenny, the internet got interrupted. Okay, I'm going to the bathroom. The internet I got without internet, so I moved to the mobile. So what were you saying?
I was saying, I want to thank you and whoever's here in this room suffering through this long-winded exposition.
I enjoyed it a lot.
I want to say thank you very much. I know we got off on the wrong foot when I first met you, but this is really what art could do. It brings people together, and I just want to thank you for listening and for being so thoughtful and for inviting me, and I'm appreciative for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm enjoying it a lot. So let's go to the bathroom, 2 minutes, and we reconvene. And the rest, the cameras, what's going on with Skype, with Zoom? I mean, so okay, in 2 minutes we come back.
Okay. What time is it? Oh my God. I've been going for 2 hours. No, another hour. Yeah. The class is in Argentina. He's in England, Hastings. No, but it's recorded. He switched the time 12 times. It's a lecture podcast too. I thought it was an hour.
Right. So now we pass to the last track of the interview, and if anyone has seen us, and I'm pass her the invitation, and so anyone are you there? Because I mean
I'm here.
No, yes. I'm talking about the participants.
They're sleeping. They're in deep REM sleep.
They're hiding. And they're hiding.
See,
Alexis.
I'm here. I'm Flora.
Okay.
I'm here.
Flora, how are you? Where are you?
Good. I'm in Buenos Aires at the moment.
Nice.
She's nominated to the Oscar documentaries.
Wow.
Yep.
I would love, can you send me a link?
Flora? There you are.
Can I say something? You could use this recording to torture military prisoners to get them to capitulate.
And it's not true. I don't know if because it's my topic that AIDS, but I enjoyed it. Maybe I tortured the people, but I loved it.
My family certainly considers it a form of inhumane treatment.
I loved it. Flora, put the microphone on. Turn the microphone
on. Sorry, I thought I had it on. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry, I just want to apologize because I couldn't finish working on time, so I came in a little bit late. I only came in about half an hour ago, so I'm sorry I missed a bit of it. Sorry about that.
I thought we were speaking for an hour, but it was 2 hours already.
It was 2 hours already. It's so funny.
Really? Oh,
it's
no.
1:30 in the morning where I am.
Oh, sorry. I missed quite a bit.
If you're a glutton for punishment, it's been recorded.
Yes. No. I'm glad. I'm really happy that it's been recorded. So thanks for that. I think it's wonderful.
I would love to watch any film work that you can share with me.
So
you know what?
Yeah.
Steve. No. You know that I have been aiming. I have done, I don't know, probably about 9 films, and I have a lot of the films that I've done. I gotten awards. But, because you sell them to a distributor, then I lose the link. So, I don't know, I don't have them on a link. I should put them on a website, but it's technically illegal to have them on a link. It's technically illegal.
Download them. So, just send me I'll download them. I'll pay for it. I don't care.
Yeah. I'll see. You know what? Actually, I will put a website together where I can have them and then forward them.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, the nominated one. What was about? What was it about? It was
the nominated one.
It was about
it was about American foreign policy during the Vietnam War and the denial of what they were doing in in Laos and the countries around. They were denying that they were using those countries to get into Vietnam, and that they were creating war in other countries as well. And what happened is the story, it's following a family for 20 years and what happened to them and their family through the war, and quite very contemporary and very related to any country's foreign policy with war and refugees and all of that.
So I would like to take this to go with my first question. If anyone has a question for Kenny, please say so. But I wanted to start with what I think is something that made me contact you back, because I'm very interested in our kind. You're very interested in something that started in the 2010, and it happened in different parts of the world. For example, Avelina Lesper, she was going to be here too. She's a Mexican art critic. She's the opposite of you. She believes that if you're not a manufactured art and you're a virtuosi, it's not art, which is very like Academia Royale of Arts, but it doesn't matter. The thing is that she attracts a lot of people in YouTube. She brings attention to the art world in a way that I think the art world stopped bringing attention to become something different, become like a society gathering, a social gathering that distributes identity, and not really a passion for art. It's a passion for a different thing. So the question is linked to Flora, because Flora works with the kind of things, medium, for example, documentary, that today or since the 2015 has become mainstream artworks. I mean, she's not an artist of gallery because she with the documentary, because she hasn't decided to, but if she wants to, she can easily do that, because that's the medium that is today canonic. As a pushing aside aesthetics, although documentaries has a lot of aesthetics, but in a way it's about ethics and not about the political and not about the aesthetic, the form. But in your case, the image that we just saw, the two images that we just saw, are saturated by form, by aesthetics. And so my question was that what is the place of the political in art, mostly coming from where you come from, which is the contemporary art world. That is a world that was born with Reagan and Thatcher. With what? With Reagan and Thatcher, the 80s. It's literally the state, that the welfare state that recoils. So what is the place of politics in what you do, which I think it has a big place? Not partisan politics, but politics, the political.
Well, first of all, the notion art and money have been in bed since the Renaissance. Yeah. There's nothing new to the notion of a kind of incestuous relationship of artists. Da Vinci, he would have a commission from a client, and if another client came along and was more prominent, he had sued for breaking a breach of a contract, because he was looking for more opportunity, more esteem, more resources from his clients through his art. And like Albert Dürer, he said, why should I make a painting when I could make more money from a print? He had his mother, if he was going to travel throughout Europe, he would send an emissary, in some instances his mother, that would go and sell his prints ahead to generate income stream. And he also had the first lawsuit protecting his trademark when his signature was copied by forgers.
Yeah.
So it's certainly, art and commerce were not born of Ronald Reagan or Margaret Thatcher by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I said you.
Oh, me. I mean, when Reagan was elected, I was 20 years less than I was a teenager, late teen.
But I mean, I'm talking about art fairs, the market, the contemporary art
so
market.
Look, if so we've spoken about Marcel Broders making art about museums. We've seen works by Paul Tech where he's making his art references other artists' work to reauthor them in a way like appropriation that was like 20 years ahead of Richard Prince, who's like the grandfather or father of appropriation art. Well, no. Paul Tech stole an existing, well, he borrowed, but he copied Judd, and in a way, it's a different form of intellectual appropriation. He hijacked other people's art to make
hijack. I love that verb for Tech.
For me, because I came in unschooled, I never knew what you couldn't do. So the art world proscribes behavior.
Very nice.
So again, it's delineated by negativity. There's art. I'll never. So when I first walked into the gallery and I was scanned from my shoes, I've been denied admittance to galleries because of the way I dress. I dress for comfort. I wear the same vintage polyester track pants and shirt and whatever. I really don't care. But the art world is so judgmental that it becomes stifling. And you don't hear of a fashion designer that would turn away a customer because they don't want the customer projecting an image of sorts, although I'm sure a lot of designers
I think it's
like that.
Yeah.
But you can rock up. You go to
in Pretty Woman, there's a scene.
Yeah, but you patronize the store and you're able to buy some because they made an association that she was a prostitute or something.
Yeah.
All gallery. If you go to a gallery on any continent in the world, they have the same clinical, sterile architecture.
Yeah.
There are all of these tropes where they look you have to look a certain way. They immediately make classifications. You're a potential buyer. You're obviously an academic or an artist or a curator. So no galleries, pretty much the world over, except for now the Lower East Side in New York, but galleries are universally, for the most part, closed on Sundays. Sunday is the day when everybody is off work, generally speaking. Why would galleries be closed on the day where everyone has the time? Because they want people there for a reason, to buy.
With money, yeah, they don't have to work.
Right. So when Soho became the center for the contemporary art world in the 80s. And when it became, the art world is frequently gentrifying areas that are where there's bigger, cheaper space, artists flock in galleries. So they were in the East Village before Soho. The first art gallery that opened in Soho was Paula Cooper, and in the late 60s, I guess. And so what am I saying?
Very much linked to Fluxus too. Soho, the Soho to Massiera's development.
So like the architecture is sterile and the galleries are closed on Sunday when they're accessible. What I was saying was, I'll never forget, there was when the galleries
So where's the political in your
wait. When the galleries gentrified Soho, one gallery, actually a band of a small handful of galleries, made a determination to move together to an area where there was no public transportation that was inaccessible. They wanted to remove themselves from tourists and tire kickers, from people that weren't serious about spending money in the gallery. There were too many visitors that were generalized. So the galleries moved. Art is cultivating inaccessibility. Art has painted itself into a corner. When you look at it used to be that designers weren't celebrities or models, and then that became, completely exploited commercially. And various other forms of artistic practice became mainstreamed. accept fine art, because the art world always trying to create a picture of it's only knowable by the few, it's erudite, it's purposefully hermetic, it cultivates lack of communication, and it's only like, so basically my sense of the political is I'm not overtly political, but we spoke about art, about institutions, about art, and I make art about the commercial institutions that constitute the art world. So my art is a critique using humor to disarm my message. But I mean, it's not like looking in my own belly button and navel gazing, but it's not always about this, but it frequently has been. I'll never, like, I feel so alienated. That's the overall feeling, emotion that I constantly experience in my art life is rejection. Not for what you do, it's for where you went to school, who you are, how you stand in this pecking order. And anyway, so my art, like, it's humanistic. When you spoke about this generosity, to me, that's like the integral. I love to facilitate opportunities for other people. I like to create hope. My show is called Keeping Hope Alive, instilling inspiration in people where no one in the art world will talk about anything. They're so self-interested. Everything is, the art world runs by the economic notion of a zero-sum game, where one person excels at the measurable expense of another participant in the art world. It's such a kind of black and white area of self-interest and self-promotion, and like I mentioned the popularity contest, this cult of personality. Now art is devolved into a hybrid between luxury goods and collectibles, I mentioned. But the point is, my sense of political is the personal. It's about acceptance, about encouragement. It's about, I sound like Jeff Koons, who talks about fulfilling our transcendental sense of possibilities. But I truly believe that art has helped me, art has saved my life. And I'm self-taught, I'm doing it for pure, I don't want anything from it. I just want to live.
So what it takes to be an what is an artist today? Because I mean, your definition of art is quite romantic. It takes us back to Winkelmann and to Constable. It's kind of like the artist it's an antenna that links the earth with heaven. So what is your how would you define what is an artist? How do I become an artist?
I can just relate to my own history, and I mentioned that I lost my mother when I was 13. My father was one of them. He was sarcastic, mean-spirited, cynical, unkind, unkind, period. And growing up alone, in my own mental space, taking these thoughts and nurturing, I had to nurture myself and giving form to these thoughts and feelings. In a way, at first, it was totally detached from revelatory, like Paul Tech's questionnaire. I was doing stuff with National Geographic magazine and car magazines and juxtaposing them and recontextualizing them.
Like a way of escaping from your.
Art is about intent and the purpose you ascribe to your activity. And I guess with philosophy, it was the first time I never knew that. I thought school, academia, was something that was like cough medicine. It was something foisted upon you, forced on you, that it was nothing. I didn't see any, I never had a positive, affirmative experience in a classroom, until I stumbled into an introductory philosophy class, and I found a mentor in this woman.
So for me, art is giving
a physical manifestation of interior thoughts. And so it's when I say it's a self-expression and whatever, it's a cliche, but it's about art can't exist in a vacuum. So for me, it's like writing, it's like singing, it's like performing in a theater. It's just taking a thought, which is, it's a way of.
Sorry, I'm going to plug this. So it's kind of like, but it's not just that, because it's like you put on art something heavier. It's one thing is to write, and another thing is to be an artist. For you, to be an artist.
For me, it's a form of social critique. I'm critiquing myself. I'm critiquing society in a way, and I'm particularly critiquing this fucked up, twisted, demented world that calls itself this bastion of creativity and exploration of thought and process and technique. But in the end, it's just affirming what's been affirmed already previously. And it's a celebration of the safe and the cautious and the backward looking.
NFTs came all of a sudden. Sorry, interrupted you.
Well, I mean, my politics is about freedom, laissez-faire. I'm a little bit of a nihilist because I like to kind of undermine the status quo when basically the art world has its own brand of criticism, and I rail against it in my own dumbass way. But I hate hypocrisy and the lack and disingenuousness. And the art world has branded its own hideous form of being a closed. It's like when you pick up a rock and there's 300 intertwined worms. It's incestuous. It just doesn't expand and absorb and reach out and commingle in a way that's only self-interested. And a chunk of what I do is reaction and trying to like destabilize. I've written articles and I put the fear of God into these super powerful, successful people that I'll never achieve anything of the likes they have in the conventional sense. But I scare people that are the most whatever. I'm not bragging. It's stupid.
Have they had a revenge on? Have they come back to you with that? Because fear is something that doesn't go away. Like,
I'm just another idiot. But the way I effectuate that is through telling the truth. And I'm dog. I will not stop in the pursuit of information. So for me, I'm an investigative journalist in a world that's sealed. Even people in the same field don't share the intricacies. And all of these rules and regulations are like omerta in the mafia. In the mafia, omerta is the code of silence.
And the code of silence, agreements of silence.
Your world, if you're an aspiring, when you go to graduate school, the only class that you, first and foremost should be, what do you do the day you get out of graduate school? How do you forge a life doing what you love the most? All I want to do is try to create a framework that's extendable to other people on how to accomplish, if they want to be in the art world, I'm there to deconstruct and chip away at these edifices that are absolutely a self-perpetuating system of a closed-end system.
How do you keep because there's something that I admire from what you say, because I did that, I do that, but since 3 years ago, I thought actually with my cancellation, the cancellation was the proof of everything that I was trying to prove. So at that point, I said, what's next? Because I mean, my point is I cannot carry on saying the same thing over and over and over. And in your case, do you feel that you reached that point and then came NFTs, or NFTs is an opportunity to prove even farther your point?
So for me, I have a friend here who's a photographer, and he made art employing the blockchain in 2013, well before that, NFTs. But I always I'm always interested in, I'm not interested in the past or the present even. I'm always interested in trying to portend what could be next for art, for technology. So I'm not a technologist, I'm not a programmer, and I can't code. But I always had the foresight and the inclination to, for me, art is about culture, about politics, economics, and the social, political, but also technology. So the state of technology is a reflection of human ingenuity and accomplishment. And it's not all of it is good, obviously. I mean, people talk about how AI is going to destroy civilization. I think fucking people are doing a damn good job of killing themselves.
Yeah.
And I never met a dishonest computer. It's the people that are dealing with these things that are learning to exploit them and take advantage. And when I was younger, I always was cognizant of technology and interested, not in a nerdy kind of way, but more as an overall phenomenon. And I remember when I was in law school, the first computers I remember before Apple, there was a company called Heathkit, and the first computers for the domestic context came from a company, a kit company, meaning they sold the pieces, and for a hobbyist was able to put together a computer, which previously it would take a football pitch sized room of computers to effectuate what a phone could do. And when I was in law school, I bought the first computer, aside from Apple, was an IBM desktop before laptops existed.
All right, yeah.
That's how old I am. And it was a big...
How old are you?
61. How old are you?
Oh, wow. 52.
Oh, you're a baby.
Yeah, well, no.
I'm very immature, and I have the enthusiasm of...
We shared that. I have the
curiosity. Curiosity is another key ingredient to being an artist. You just have to always be curious. And I was curious about technology. I could only have an attention span talking to you, studying for a lecture, or writing. Otherwise, I'm like a mosquito.
Isn't that something? Because I'm the same thing. The ADD.
But yeah, so I got this computer, and it was this terrible shade of beige, this institutional color, and I guess it was purposefully made.
I remember, yeah.
So I got the computer with a floppy disk with a big cathode ray screen, and I just proceeded to type 1,000 pages of notes that I had to study for my bar exam, and that was my interfacing with this device. And word processing affected my writing and transformed the way that I crafted a sentence, yet a paragraph, in the same way that ChatGPT and AI and image creation and text creation, I've already used ChatGPT in a few essays. I don't use it to write them for me. I use it to posit sentences in a way that inspires me as a jumping off point. It's not people say that AI can't be creative and can't be emotive. And I've had ChatGPT write jokes. I asked it to write a few paragraphs. I didn't want to go to Freeze yet. I wanted to write about it for ArtNet, where I have a column. And I asked it to write 2 paragraphs in the vein of my writing with humor and sarcasm. And it did. It couldn't recognize the paragraphs after I edited them and rewrote them, but it came out with 2 jokes that were fantastic. Like, there was so much to see, but all I could focus on was the exit sign was one of the jokes. And another one about, like, it was a feast for the eyes and a famine for the soul. I mean, that's fucking ChatGPT. About Freeze Art Fair in Los Angeles. Pretty good. But anyway, so I always employed digital means to create whatever art I made. So I showed my first computer animation, which was based on me masturbating in the library in law school, because Vito Acconci was like my gateway drug to conceptual art. And I'm not just a onanist. I was really interested in the fact that he was behind this movement of dematerialization. So I'm always contradicting myself. I'll contradict myself.
Well, with that, because I mean, it's yes and no, because he materializes himself.
Yes, but he also was trying to make an art that couldn't be assimilated into the market.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the market will absorb a hurricane.
Everything,
They can make a profit from it.
Everything.
Anyway, so I made a computer animation in 1993. I made computer prints in the mid 90s. And again, like I wanted to use, artists are very opportunistic. They will take whatever's in their grasp and try to use it to their own means, for their own expression. Again, that's a corny phrase, but like, so your artists are omnivorous for you taking whatever's available at the fingertips. I love teaching a studio practice class at School of Visual Arts on the day that a lockdown was announced, the day before, and I almost opted out of it because that was the first time I ever heard the word Zoom, and I was scared. Fear, what drives the art world away from NFTs, away from technology, away from the blockchain, is fear. It's human defense mechanism to recoil from the unfamiliar. And the art world is so fucking ingrained and set in its ways in stone. They're territorial. They don't want to give away any, you know, they don't want to, it's again, back to the zero sum. If one thing intercedes, it takes away from something. That art world always says pays lip service to nurturing new audiences. The art world doesn't want new audiences. They want the same people with private museums and money that they previously sold to. Anyway, so when NFTs came along, I had something very unusual for an old man in 57. I have an open mind and I'm curious and I'll never stop. And our life right now, you couldn't come up with a better example. You've somehow wedded YouTube to Zoom, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a feat of great accomplishment technologically. But we've never been in an age so defined, codified by technology.
Can I ask you one thing? Because listening to you, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not meaning to do anything even remotely like
please,
that.
Please help me, please.
No, but it's about your relationship with the art world. I think by the art world, you mean the gallery system and the commercial art fair system.
Yes, but I just said something when I went to the bathroom to my wife. I haven't spoken this much about art. I can't remember this for 2 hours. We spoke about Paul Tech. I thought it was an hour. It was 2 hours transpired.
It was 2 hours.
And I was taken aback.
But this is what we have in common. I think we have in common this true.
Yeah, we like art. That's very unusual in the art world, to like art. Nobody likes art. People, I say I never get to speak about art because I work in the art world.
That's why I wanted you to start speaking about art, because if not, you're going to start speaking about yourself and about the system. So I want you to talk about art.
It's 1:50 a.m.
Okay, let me do
no. Let me just say something. I am so energized. I am so inspired. I can talk to you till 5 o'clock in the morning.
But your wife wants to kill us both. No.
I think marriage is a social construct, and I tend to believe it was created by a bunch of
bunch of morons. So I wanted to ask you this, because I mean, you have a dysfunctional relationship, and I think that you have a wife, and also you have another wife that it's the art system. Because I was thinking about our different paths, and in a way, I got really fed up of the art world. And it's kind of like, to me, I don't interact, I don't read, I don't care about that. It's not that I don't care about art. I mean, I'm very interested.
I don't have to explain it, it's evident.
But you're very much involved.
Because I'm a pervert.
Yes, or something like that.
In as much as I hate the art world, and I bemoan it, and I criticize it, and I complain incessantly. Nevertheless, as a writer, it's all fodder for my next essay.
But I think you went to the NFTs to bother them.
Oh, I really enjoyed that very much, definitely. But also, what I'm speaking in a utopian vein, which is very important. I use this word NFTism, and for me, people say NFTs are just a marketplace to buy and sell digital assets. And I think that's absolutely untrue. Besides, I mean, look, Steve McQueen, the filmmaker from the UK, the video artist, his auction record is $30,000. He's one of the most extraordinary human beings. His prime mode of art making is video and photography. His auction record should be $10 million. But because he makes video has largely been uncollectible. Bill Viola, not that I'm crazy about his work, but his auction record is 700. I hate to speak in terms of like, the reductive money, but Bill Viola is $700,000. He's the world's by far foremost video practitioner. That's because video is not painting, because it's considered ethereal. It's considered a subgenre of art, because there's, again, this totem pole, this hierarchy where painting is probably above bronze.
It's not synchronic, it's diachronic. Yeah.
If art is a reflection of our time, we live in the time of this, of phones and computers. So why wouldn't digital art be the prevalent mode of expression today? It should be.
Why?
We're in a digital renaissance. Why? Because it's fucking collectible. People are scared.
Why is it collectible? I don't understand that.
Because they think it's fleeting. First of all, this is a common refrain.
Wait 2 or 3 years. Wait 2 or 3 years.
No, it's more than anyone. The common refrain is that anyone could right-click save a digital image. Let me tell you, because I am like extremely democratic with all of my art is free. Anything I've ever done, I've made like videos since the '93. All of my videos are free. If you want them, they're free.
But that is a class thing too. I mean, that's because you can.
Well, I am like I'm a man of many a man-child filled with self-negating contradictions.
But it's also like a thing of class. I mean, I can give this because I can.
No, I need to make a living. That's why I'm a hustler, and I'm always. But I mean, again, this sounds stupid, but Malcolm X said, by any means necessary to achieve equality and defeat racism. But the same applies in life with anything.
I think you're a humanist.
It's a battle. It's a fight to achieve. Art has instilled my life with meaning. So why is there such resistance?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going out to hurt anybody. I'm not taking anything that's not mine. Why would the art world try to shut me out of it? Because I didn't go to the right school. I didn't go up through the typical.
How did they do that? Because you keep saying that. What happened?
People just dismiss me at every turn of events. People have said, like, whether to me or to people I know, he's not this, he's not that, he's just this. They just.
But you write at very prominent venues. You are Kenny Schacther.
That's because I just won't stop, because I won't take no for an answer, and I refuse to capitulate. I won't. I mean, a museum in Linz, in 2 hours north of Vienna, in Upper Austria, they have a very open-minded director, Alfred Weidinger, who was co-director of the Albertina and the Belvedere.
I think I heard of him.
He's running a series of 23 museums with a particular bent to the here and now, embracing technology, photography, digital means of art. And he took a risk. He went out on a limb. No one would. I mean, I was in a group show at the Kunsthalle in Zurich last year, but that was an NFT show, and for me, NFTs, for an instant, until in a year and a half, it ate the worst characteristics and qualities of the art world. In the beginning, it was about conversations, collaboration, and communication. That was shocking. I was meeting people.
Hold on. When was that?
2020, I got involved. I first learned nomenclature. Now it's like a bad word. But the art world operates with blinders on, like a horse in Central Park. The art world is so like absorbed with itself
But imagine working in the art world. Because I remember when I used to go to Art Basel to the dinners with Listen.
I never get invited.
No, because I was an art advisor. So I work with John Mack, with Coca-Cola, Morgan Stanley, Mary Lynch. So when that happened, I remember that they were unbearable. I remember I had this dinner party in Basel with these Greek collectors and Listen and Anish Kapoor. That was, unbearable. Imagine doing that for 20 years nonstop. How? Because that can affect your brain.
The only release mechanism I have, the only valve that I can open up to make it palatable, is to write about it in a very telling, revelatory way, sharing information that not only will people not speak about, they don't talk about it, about who's buying what are the machinations behind the scene.
How do you get that information?
I'm relentless.
But don't give me names. Don't give me names. But are you a journalist?
I'm old. I've been doing this for 3.5 decades. If I couldn't glean information from this community,
but I understand that you pick up the phone, you talk.
Every morsel of information is hard fought.
Wow.
I mean, plying people with alcohol. That's a great
wow.
I mean, again, like what I do is ferret out information that no one's people will. That's
the thing that I admire about you. You are relentless with energy. I lost that. I lost the.
It makes up for my lack of
I lost the frisson of sitting and writing about the artwork. I mean, it's kind of like I had it with my cancellation. It's like, okay, enough of this. I cannot do. It's like it's not with me anymore. The art system, not art. But you are there. I mean, in a way,
the thing is that the
interesting thing in the artwork.
I mean, I never set about being this gadfly, being this person with this role that's come to define me. The way it happened was almost by accident, by default. I started in the beginning. I wrote in the early '90s.
How did you start? Yeah, how did you start? The Schacther.
I just got some shitty local magazines to publish my articles, and then I was asked to write for ArtNet, a dealer's diary in the mid '90s. Walter Robinson, who's now a painter, when they shut him out of a job, he was my editor, and I was trying to imbue my mundane experiences of learning about the art world, forging a role for myself in art. I was trying to imbue it with more meaning. When you have to go to a stupid art fair for the 187,000th time, when you have to craft it into an arc of a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, you can't just haphazardly swan around and look at the same shit you see over and over again. You have to look hard. The harder you look, the harder you look is the name of a Christopher Wool painting. And it's true. The more you look, the more you see. And by giving myself this structure, which was self-created, of having to recast this experience into a story arc, I changed the experience from something that would create disdain to something that was, and in the beginning, I just thought this was my life. But the feedback was so profoundly positive from people mainly the audience of people that most favorably reacted were people that work in the worker-bees in the art world, the staff, the support system, and students, or people that wanted to get a foothold into a very unwelcoming, inaccessible world. And the more I was positively reinforced for this type of activity, my writing about these behind the scenes machinations, it fueled me to go deeper, to go dig harder, to fight more.
Right.
And every time I write an article, I have to shut my phone off for 3 days because the feedback is brutal. And I mean,
but people, and then these are my last two questions. People, in my experience, what we do is tricky because to find the negative side of something always attracts the fair and also the resentful, also the ones that have this sort of Schadenfreude in someone beating up someone. You know what I mean? So it's the Schacther is beating up the Namad. You know? So
it's funny because they're the Goliath worth billions of dollars with 150 Picassos.
Of course.
I'm a schmuck with no art education from Long Island. Just like what was the movie where Peter Sellers becomes the accidental president?
Hold on. I love that movie.
Well, that's me. It's kind of like happenstance, but very much. I know
exactly. I knew that, man.
And I'm doing it because it's given me. It's all the opportunities in my life have come from this self-created role.
But how do you because I'm at the point that I'm going to start in my blog too. I arrested the pace in order to start looking inside the people that supported me. What were their motivations? Because there was a lot, very varied and very dark too. So the good and the bad. So I mean, the bad is interesting to look at it because it has to do with what criticism can do in culture. And I'm very interested, for example, in the continuity between dictatorship and post-dictatorship. When you think about Chile, for example, that I'm studying Chile at the moment, and what you see is that the art blossoms during Pinochet. It's not after Pinochet.
Because it's resistance. Art has a responsibility to have a critical voice.
No, who told you that? No, I mean, artists.
Part of the role of an artist
didn't enjoy beautiful things. Actually, art is everywhere in the Führer, with the Führer. It's everywhere.
Shitty art that got him rejected from art school, which created this monster faced with rejection.
But listen, the architecture.
He could have used
the clothes.
No, I understand.
It's everywhere. So I mean,
art is a form of social critique in a way, and should never be complacent, and should be self-aware, and it's critical.
So do you think that you're too optimistic about what art is, and art is much more shitty than that?
I'm an optimistic cynic.
Kenny, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I wanted to talk to you since a long time, mainly because I think that something that what we do have to do is artistic in terms of that uses the social media and internet as a punching ground to bring attention to issues that has to be addressed, and the canon doesn't want to address it. So there are many levels of discussion here. So this is the first opportunity that I have to talk to someone that actually is an artist to me in that sense. I call it, how do I call it today? Technopolitical conceptualism. It's a sort of political conceptualism, right, in the sense of Latin America. No?
I use the tools that are available to my own tailored my own needs. No one ever listened to me as a child or in my adult life in the beginning. And I was quick to I mean, my kids put me on Facebook in 2008. I hesitated from getting an iPhone because I hated the hegemony of Apple. So I stuck with my BlackBerry where I could type.
Stop it. I love it.
I love it. Believe me, I'm more addicted than
I cannot live it. I tried and
I could type 300 words in the dark with no lights on the keyboard on a BlackBerry.
I can imagine.
I had the perfect keyboard. And I hated to see people always doing this on their phone screen. I just recoiled from it. And then I used the phone, and I used, people complain about Instagram and Twitter, and I would be lost without these things. And people say NFTs are stupid. They're all about money. NFTs I've created so many opportunities by onboarding so many people working away in the art world to no avail with no remuneration. I mean, you talk about like a critical stance relating to capitalism. I think you should be both. I think that you should be, I don't mind capitalism, but nobody should go without basic healthcare. That's a fundamental human right to existence. And in America, where people are littering the streets in poverty and mental health issues, that's a disgrace and a travesty for civilization, that everyone should have food and basic needs met. And that's a political position. I also believe, like a lot of the constructs, societal constructs, like the rules and regulations, are sometimes gratuitous and unjust. And I specifically deal with my immediate surroundings in terms of a chunk of my output. But I think that this position is very unusual in the art world, because I have a body of 250 short narrative videos. Initially, they were analog, then they became digital and animation, but they're largely commentary. I made a few anti-Trump videos. I've made a lot of videos about the duplicitousness, like I said, and the giant hypocrisy that pervades.
Are you aware of your power?
You know, people say that. I think I'm a fucking little piddling nobody. I think I'm,
okay.
I mean, no, I don't think, I think that's, I mean, people have criticized me saying, oh, that's easy for you to say, you're in this position of power. I fucking painstakingly clawed my way to sitting here with you, having this conversation.
But probably it has to do, that's why we can do it. Because
I never, that word never enters my consciousness, because I think it's just outright self-aggrandizing. Of course, I know that I have an audience, but that platform was...
No, I'm talking about power. I'm talking about like saying something against someone and affecting that someone's reputation.
Well, I've blown up like $50 million of art deals by revealing hidden...
There you go. There you go. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't, thank God I'm not such a pig megalomaniac that I would think power doesn't interest me. I just want to...
No, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, no, because I mean, you were talking about objectives that were very humanist and very philanthropic and very goodwill. So, I mean, to have power with those ends probably is not such a bad thing after all.
Well, I think something incredible, which I've learned over the course of my career, is that I write an article, I literally take a pay cut so my work is not behind the paywall. I want people who want to read my fucking writing being able to read it. So I'm not going to make people pay $200 or $300 a year. I mean, ArtNet will fire me for this, but I take a lower, and I don't write for the money, because it's you know, small, relatively speaking. I'm not being, you know, insensitive about it, but yeah, I want to just give hope to people and share the information and can we say that you are the art world, the artwork? That the comparison with Vito Acconci is not that, because Vito Acconci is body art, is him putting himself in the gallery. Yes.
So would we think that you are what if Vito Acconci is the body in the gallery? Maybe you are the NFT in the social media.
NFT now has negative connotations.
Well, okay, you are the
I just think what I love about NFTs
in the lineage of Lord Byron, of Oscar Wilde.
That sounds much better. You spoke about like gatekeepers and stuff. NFTs, if it wasn't for NFTs, I wouldn't have Nagel Draxler, a conceptual art gallery with 30 years of history. They began to represent me because somebody said they would never be able to adapt to technology. So they reached out to me through a DM, and like I said, I respond to everything. They asked me, how do they do an NFT show? I said, I won't tell you how to do it, but I'll do it. They let me curate a show, and it went really well. And if it wasn't for NFTs, I wouldn't have the museum show I have now. All I care about with NFTs were that it broke down barriers to entry for end crypto investors, or the people that were buying the NFT market is dead. It's zero. It's gone to zero.
Yeah, but you said something about the NFTs.
But the blockchain will always exist, because it offered people the opportunity to mint, to take their art to market directly. And like, this is really important. The thing, I sold a piece at a gallery and they never told me who the buyer was. NFTs put you in direct communication with the buyer in another platform called Discord. David Bowie said,
I love Discord.
David Bowie was a proponent of the internet for disseminating his music. He said that the internet has conflated the space between the artist and the audience. And NFTs have really kind of exploded the separation where the artist is in a direct, it's a different level of relationships that ties together the art, the maker and the collector in a way that never existed before. They have expectations of forging a relationship. And when you sell a piece of art, it's not a static thing that radiates art. It's participatory. It's an engagement. It's a token,
and I love that you
engagement.
You say that projecting it to the side of your house.
Yeah, it's reaching outward, outside the self, outside this selfish kind of self.
I love your piece to on your house front. That's very interesting.
That's what I do with all my information, all whatever knowledge I'm able to attain. I want to project it onto the house, and if you're interested, here it is. I'm opening my book. I'm opening my.
I'm going to pack. Because I'm going back to Crete. I came for one day, and I'm going back to the beach. It's been a pleasure.
You're a glutton for punishment.
Listen, whenever you're in England, you have to say that you're here, and we go for.
I would love to meet
lunch.
At first, it would have been fisticuffs. Although I'm a warrior behind
the best friendships. The best friendships.
I'm a coward, but I'm a coward when I'm in front of the keyboard. When I'm
we are like Hemingway. We're like Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald. We start fighting and then we become best friends.
Caravaggio, the Derek Jarman film. They stab each other and then they go fuck in the bushes. I love that.
But you know that Caravaggio was like that, aggressive, because of the pigment that they were smelling. It was like poppers.
He may have been a bit of an antagonistic human being to start with. Not many people murdered people in the practice of their painting. Thank you very much. I really want
to. Send my regards to your wife, to your patient wife.
It's very touching to me that you would make the time in your life to spend this time with me.
Oh, please shut up! I will spend much.
I'm appreciative. That's what I'm trying to say.
I
don't take anything for granted, and that goes with your power comment. I don't take anything for granted. It's all.
I mean, thanks a lot for that, and we're going to do it again. I mean, I enjoyed very much.
Yikes!
You know, I think that I'm going to put this without editing. I'm going to put this as 3 hours and 20.
For the marathon.
That's the performance. 3 hours and 20.
Thank you very much for you listening it from me. I love to do this because it makes me fucking think in a context that doesn't foster.
I don't think that you can find in the internet a chat of 3 hours and 20 minutes.
I like that.
This kind of energy.
That's an endurance performance.
With this kind of energy. So that's why I'm going to put it like that.
Okay.
It's fine to people as passionate as this for art in the art world. Come on.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Get in touch anytime. Any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Kenny. Thank you.
Very easy to find. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.